The Polaroid showed a woman bound to a rusted chair in darkness, blood trailing from her temple. On the back, scrawled in black marker, "She talked, she dies tonight." The photograph landed on Bishop Crow's table at 11:47 p.m. inside a dying Reno diner, delivered by trembling 12-year-old hands still purple with bruises. Outside, February snow buried the highways while 18 Harley-Davidsons sat cooling in formation like sleeping predators. Inside, the Iron Vultures Motorcycle Club went silent. Leather-clad veterans with prison ink and war scars, men society had discarded long ago. The child's name was Eden Vale. Her mother had 48 hours left to live. And Bishop Crow, a man who'd already buried one daughter in Afghan soil, was about to cross every line he swore he'd never touch again. If you're watching from somewhere cold tonight, somewhere nobody's coming to save you, stay till the end. Drop a like, tell me what city you're calling from. Because this story, it doesn't go where you think. The storm hit Nevada like punishment. Snow hammered down across I-80 in sheets so thick the truck drivers pulled over and waited it out in idling rigs, exhaust pipes coughing white smoke into frozen air. The temperature dropped to 11 degrees. Wind screamed through the mountains. Everything that could close had closed. Gas stations, motels, the way station near Fernley. Everything except the Dusty Rose Diner, a sagging roadside relic held together by rust, neon, and the fact that its owner, a 70-year-old woman named Jolene, refused to acknowledge that America had left places like this behind decades ago. Inside the booths were cracked red vinyl. The jukebox hadn't worked since 2003. Coffee came in chipped mugs, and the pie tasted like cardboard, but it was warm and the lights stayed on. And Jolene didn't ask questions when rough men walked through her door smelling like gasoline and cigarette smoke. Tonight, those rough men were the Iron Vultures. 18 of them spread across the diner in heavy silence. Leather cuts draped over broad shoulders, patches worn and faded from years of highway miles. They didn't talk much. Didn't need to. These were men who'd learned to communicate through glances, through the tilt of a head, through the way boots shifted on linoleum when trouble walked in. Most of them had done time. Most carried scars from wars. Nobody thanked them for fighting. They were mechanics, ex-cons, construction workers, bouncers, men who worked with their hands because the world had no use for what lived inside their heads. Their president, a man called Reaper, sat in the corner booth nursing black coffee and staring at nothing. 62 years old, gray beard down to his chest, hands like hammers. He'd founded the club in 1987 after coming home from a war that turned him into something his family didn't recognize. The Iron Vultures weren't the biggest MC in Nevada, weren't the richest, but they had a reputation. Don't touch their people, don't lie to their faces, and sure as hell don't involve children in your bullshit. Bishop Crow sat 3 booths down, alone. He was the road captain, the man who planned routes, scouted locations, and made sure the club moved like a single organism when they rode together. 46 years old, lean and weathered, gray stubble across a jaw that rarely relaxed, dark eyes that looked through people instead of at them. He wore his trauma the way other men wore watches, constant, invisible to strangers, heavy as a chain around the heart. He'd lost his daughter 6 years ago. Her name had been Sarah, 8 years old, blonde hair, gap-toothed smile, the kind of kid who asked 1,000 questions and believed her daddy could fix anything. Bishop had been overseas when she got sick. Meningitis. It moved fast. His ex-wife called him on a satellite phone in Kandahar, sobbing so hard he could barely understand the words. By the time his boots hit American soil, Sarah was already in the ground. He hadn't forgiven himself. Probably never would. Now he sat in that diner booth with his hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee, staring at the snow through the window, thinking about nothing and everything. The war, the funerals, the women who'd tried to fix him and finally gave up. The nights he woke up choking on silence in cheap motel rooms, convinced he could still hear his daughter calling his name. The club gave him purpose, gave him brothers, gave him a reason to keep breathing when every other reason had turned to ash. But it didn't fill the hole. Nothing did. That's when the door opened. The cold rushed in first, a blast of winter air that smelled like frozen asphalt and distant pine trees. Then came the girl, 12 years old, maybe 13, skinny in the way kids get when food isn't guaranteed, soaked through to the bone despite the oversized hoodie hanging off her frame, dark hair plastered to her skull, sneakers with holes in the toes. She clutched a torn backpack against her chest like it contained the last thing in the world that mattered. But it was her eyes that stopped everyone cold. Terror, raw, animal terror that lived so deep it had become part of her nervous system. The kind of fear that didn't go away when the lights came on. The kind that followed you into sleep and whispered that nowhere was safe, nobody was coming, and survival was a lie you told yourself to make it through the next 5 minutes. Every biker in that diner recognized it, because most of them had worn that same expression once. The girl walked past the counter, past the booth where Jolene stood frozen with a coffee pot in her hand, past Reaper, past the enforcers, past men twice her size who could have snapped her like kindling. She walked with the grim determination of someone who'd already decided that whatever happened next couldn't be worse than what she was running from. She stopped directly in front of Bishop Crow. He looked up slowly, coffee cup halfway to his lips. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the girl reached into her backpack with shaking hands and pulled out a photograph. Not a regular picture, a Polaroid, the kind that developed itself, edges already curling with age. She slid it across the table without a word. Bishop set down his coffee, picked up the photograph, went very, very still. The image showed a woman in her mid-30s tied to a metal chair in what looked like a basement or storage room. Duct tape across her mouth, blood running from a cut above her left eyebrow. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated with terror, staring directly at the camera like she was begging whoever held it to stop, to please just stop. Bishop turned the Polaroid over, written on the back in thick black marker. She talked to the cops. She dies at midnight tomorrow. The diner had gone completely silent. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. Bishop looked up at the girl. His voice came out low, rough, like gravel scraping across steel. "Who is she?" "My mom." The girl's voice cracked. "Her name's Clara Vale." "And who are you?" "Eden." Bishop studied her face. The bruises were faint but visible now that she stood under the diner's fluorescent lights. Yellowing marks around her wrists, a shadow along her left cheekbone, the kind of injuries that came from being grabbed hard and held down. "Who took this picture, Eden?" "Schweiten, Barmoso." "I don't know his name." Her hands twisted the straps of her backpack. "But he runs trucks. Big rigs. My mom worked nights cleaning rooms at the Sunset Motel off exit 46. She saw something she wasn't supposed to see." "What did she see?" Eden's eyes welled up. "People in a truck. In the back. Locked in. She heard them crying." The temperature in the diner seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Reaper stood from his corner booth, leather creaking. The other vultures shifted, subtle movements that looked casual but weren't. These men knew exactly what Eden was describing. They'd all heard the rumors, trafficking networks running through the northern Nevada freight corridors, using the empty highways and lonely truck stops to move human cargo under cover of bad weather and distance. Most people heard those rumors and shook their heads. The Iron Vultures had seen the evidence. Bishop kept his eyes on Eden. When did they take her? 3 days ago. She came home from work Tuesday morning, and there was a man in our trailer. Big guy. Bald. He grabbed her. Told me if I called the cops, they'd kill her and come back for me. Tears streamed down Eden's face now. "He gave me that picture yesterday. Said I had until tomorrow night to keep my mouth shut." "Where's your father?" "Dead. OD'd when I was 6. Any other family?" "No." Bishop looked at the photograph again. At Clara Vale's terrified eyes. At the blood. At the timestamp in the corner, February 14th, 2026, 9:47 p.m. Yesterday. Which meant whoever had Clara was keeping her alive for now, but only as leverage to keep Eden quiet. "Why come to us?" Bishop asked. "Why not the police?" Eden's laugh was bitter, broken. "The cops don't give a shit about people like us. My mom tried reporting what she saw. They took a statement and told her to stay out of it. Next day, she disappeared." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I heard stories about you guys. People say the Iron Vultures protect kids, that you don't let bad things happen to them. We're not heroes, Eden. Orange. Eat. I don't need heroes." Her voice hardened, and for just a second, Bishop saw steel beneath the fear. "I need someone who'll actually do something." Silence. Bishop looked past Eden to where Reaper stood. The president's face was carved from stone, but his eyes said everything. Your call, brother. But if we do this, we do it all the way. Bishop had buried one daughter already. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to tell this girl that the world was cruel and broken and there was nothing he could do to fix it. That getting involved meant risking everything the club had built, that he'd already lost too much and couldn't afford to care about another child who'd end up in the ground, or worse. But he looked at Eden's bruised wrists, at the terror still living behind her eyes, at the photograph of Clara Vale tied to that chair. And he thought about Sarah, about the 1,000 ways he'd failed her, about the promise he'd made standing over her grave 6 years ago in the rain, swearing that if he ever got another chance to protect something innocent, he wouldn't hesitate. He stood slowly, leather jacket creaking in the silence. "Sit down, he told Eden. "You're freezing. Jolene, get her some food and coffee." The old woman behind the counter moved immediately, already pulling out a plate. Bishop turned to the rest of the club. 18 men watching him with the patient stillness of wolves waiting for the pack leader's decision. "We've got 43 hours, Bishop said, "which means we start now." Reaper nodded once. "What do you need?" "Everything we know about freight operations between here and the state line. Every truck stop, every warehouse, every shipping company operating dirty. I want names. I want routes. I want to know who's moving cargo they shouldn't be moving and where they're doing it." One of the enforcers, a man called Chains, spoke up. "You think this is connected to that ring out of Carson City? The one running girls through the northern corridor?" "I think Eden's mother saw something that got her grabbed in under 24 hours. That's not random. That's organized." Bishop picked up the Polaroid again, studied it. Bishop picked up the it. And whoever took this picture wanted Eden scared enough to stay silent, which means they're not done with her yet. Another biker, younger, tattooed neck to knuckles, leaned forward. Biker, younger. "We can't go to the cops with this." "No." Bishop's voice was flat. "Cops won't move fast enough. And if Clara already tried reporting it, that means someone on the inside might be dirty. So we handle it ourselves. We handle it ourselves." Reaper pulled out his phone. "I'll make calls. See what the other chapters know. If there's a trafficking network working these highways, somebody's heard something." Bishop nodded. Then he looked back at Eden, who'd slumped into the booth and was staring at the plate of food Jolene had set in front of her like she'd forgotten how to eat. He sat down across from her. "Eden, look at me." She lifted her eyes. "I need you to tell me everything," Bishop said quietly. "Every detail you remember. The man who came to your trailer. What did he look like? What did he sound like? What kind of vehicle was he driving? Anything your mom said about the motel, about the truck she saw, about the people crying inside it, everything." Eden swallowed hard. "Will you find her?" Bishop didn't lie to children. "I'm going to try, but I need your help to do it." For the next 20 minutes, Eden talked. She described the man who'd grabbed her mother, 6'2", bald, scar across his left eyebrow, wearing a brown jacket with a shipping company logo she couldn't remember. He'd driven a black SUV with tinted windows. He'd smelled like diesel and cigarettes. When he grabbed Clara, he'd moved fast, professional, like he'd done it 100 times before. She described the Sunset Motel, a decaying 2-story building off Exit 46, the kind of place where truckers slept in 4-hour shifts and nobody asked about the stains on the walls. Clara had been cleaning room 12 around 3 a.m. Tuesday when she heard engines outside, looked through the window and saw a semi-truck idling in the parking lot with its trailer doors open. Inside the trailer, people. 5 or 6, Eden thought, based on what her mother had whispered on the phone before the line went dead. Young, scared. Some of them barely looked like adults. Clara had watched a man in a suit walk up to the truck, exchange something with the driver, cash maybe, or paperwork, and then the doors closed and the truck rolled out. Clara had called 911, gave a statement to a deputy who showed up an hour later, took notes, and told her they'd look into it. What the rumpshums? Us. Next morning, the bald man was waiting in her trailer. Bishop listened without interrupting, filing every detail away. When Eden finished, she looked small and exhausted, like telling the story had drained whatever reserve she'd been running on. "You did good," Bishop told her. "Now I need you to stay here with Jolene. Don't leave the diner. Don't talk to anyone you don't know. Understand?" "Where are you going?" to find your mother. Can I come? No. Please. Eden. Bishop's voice was firm but not cruel. What we're about to do, you don't need to see. Trust me on that. She looked like she wanted to argue, but something in his eyes stopped her. Maybe she recognized the weight there, the kind of darkness that came from seeing too much, doing too much, losing too much. Bishop stood and pulled on his gloves. The other vultures were already moving, grabbing jackets, finishing cigarettes, checking phones. The energy in the diner had shifted from stillness to controlled violence, the kind of focus that came before a fight. Reaper met Bishop at the door. You sure about this, brother? No. Good. Means you're thinking straight. Reaper clapped a hand on Bishop's shoulder. We find the girl's mother, we extract her clean, and we don't leave a trail. Understood? Understood. And if this goes bad, it won't. Reaper's eyes said he'd heard that before. You're getting attached already. I can see it. Bishop didn't deny it. Couldn't. She's 12, Reaper. Same age Sarah would have been. I know. That's what worries me. Reaper lowered his voice. You die trying to save this kid's mother, and that girl ends up with nobody. You thought about that? Bishop had thought about it. He thought about it every time he looked at Eden and saw his daughter's ghost staring back. I'll be careful, he said. Bullshit. You haven't been careful since Afghanistan. But Reaper didn't argue further. He just pulled his helmet on and headed for the door. Let's ride. But. The vultures filed out into the storm. Engines roared to life one by one, 18 Harleys growling in the frozen night like mechanical wolves. Chrome flashed under the diner's neon sign. Snow swirled in the headlights. Bishop threw a leg over his bike, a blacked-out Road King with more miles on it than most people drove in a lifetime, and felt the familiar rumble between his thighs, the engine's heartbeat syncing with his own. He looked back through the diner window. Eden stood pressed against the glass, small and alone, watching them with desperate hope written across her face. Bishop thought about Sarah again, about the last time he'd seen her alive, waving from the porch as he left for deployment, about the promise he'd made over her grave. Then he twisted the throttle and followed his brothers into the storm, snow hammering his face, the highway disappearing into darkness ahead like a throat swallowing them whole. They had 43 hours to find Clara Vale. And Bishop had a feeling that before this was over, the Iron Vultures were going to burn every rule they'd ever followed straight down to ash. The Sunset Motel sat 30 miles east, a gutted corpse of a building that America had forgotten sometime around 1992. 2 stories of peeling paint and broken windows, surrounded by cracked asphalt and a parking lot full of potholes deep enough to swallow a tire. The neon sign out front flickered weakly, Sioux Set MOTL in sickly pink light. Half the rooms looked abandoned. The other half looked like places people went to disappear. Bishop and 3 other vultures pulled into the lot just after 1 a.m. The storm had followed them the whole way, snow thick enough that visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. Wind screamed through the empty lot. Ice clung to power lines overhead. The motel office was dark, except for a single bulb burning behind cracked glass. They killed the engines and sat in silence for a moment, listening. No traffic on the highway, no voices, just wind and the distant groan of the building settling under the weight of too many bad years. Chains spoke first, his voice low and rough. Place looks dead. It's not. Bishop scanned the windows. 3rd floor, 2nd from the left. A curtain had just moved. Someone's watching. Cops? Doubt it. Cops would have turned on the lights by now. The 4th biker, a man called Wraith, cracked his knuckles. 40 years old, heavily tattooed, with the kind of 1,000-yard stare that came from doing things in dark places that never made it into official reports. He'd been a Marine before the club, sniper, 3 tours, the kind of man who could sit motionless for 16 hours waiting for a shot and never blink. You want me to check the perimeter? Wraith asked. Not yet. We go in quiet first. If this place is connected to what Eden described, we don't want to spook anyone before we get answers. They approached the office. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled like mold, stale cigarettes, and something chemical that might have been cleaning products or might have been something worse. A single desk sat behind bulletproof glass with a buzzer and a slot for passing money through. No one at the desk. Bishop hit the buzzer. Waited. Hit it again. Footsteps shuffled from a back room. A man emerged, late 50s, gut hanging over his belt, thinning hair slicked back with too much gel. He looked at the four bikers standing in his office, and his expression went from annoyed to nervous in under a second. "We're full," he said quickly. "No rooms." Bishop leaned against the counter. "We're not here for a room." "Then you need to leave." "Private property." "We're looking for information." "Don't have any." "You didn't hear the question yet." The manager's eyes flicked toward the back room. Just for a second. But it was enough. Bishop caught it. "Tuesday night," Bishop said. "Around 3 a.m. Semi-truck in your parking lot. You see it?" "Don't know what you're talking about." "You sure?" "Because a woman named Clara Vale was cleaning rooms that night. She saw something. Next day, she disappeared." The manager's face twitched. "I don't know anyone named Clara. So what?" Chain stepped forward. 6'4", 260, with hands that looked like they could crush cinder blocks. "Want to try that again?" Look, I just managed the place. I don't get involved in what?" Bishop's voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. "Finish that sentence." The manager swallowed hard. His eyes darted toward the back room again. This time Bishop saw what he was looking at. A phone on the desk, screen lit up, like he'd been about to make a call when they walked in. Warning someone. Bishop moved fast. He vaulted over the counter before the manager could react, grabbed the phone, and checked the screen. The last number dialed was labeled R. Mercer, dispatch. "Who's Mercer?" Bishop asked quietly. "Nobody. Just a guy who books rooms sometimes." "For what?" "Drivers, truckers, people passing through." "What kind of truckers?" The manager didn't answer. Bishop set the phone down gently. "Last chance. Tell me what happened Tuesday night, or I let my brothers start asking questions their way." Behind him, Wraith cracked his neck. Chains pulled out a knife and started cleaning his fingernails with it, casual as breathing. The manager broke. Okay, Jesus Christ. Yeah, there was a truck Tuesday night. I didn't see what was inside, but I heard..." He hesitated. "Heard what?" "Crying, banging on the walls. I didn't look. I swear to God I didn't look. That's not my business." "Whose business is it?" "Mercer's, Royce Mercer. He runs freight through here a couple times a month. Uses the motel as a drop point. I let him use the back lot. He pays me cash. I don't ask questions." "And Clara saw the truck." "Yeah, she was supposed to be cleaning the north wing, but she must have gone outside for a smoke or something. Next thing I know, she's in here asking if I saw it, saying she's calling the cops." The manager wiped sweat from his forehead. "I told her to forget it, told her it wasn't her problem, but she didn't listen." "Where is she now?" "I don't know. I swear. After the cops came by asking questions, Mercer called me. Said he'd handle it. That's all I know." Bishop studied the man's face. He was lying about something, or at least not telling the whole truth, but pushing harder right now would just make him clam up. "This Mercer," Bishop said, "where does he operate out of?" "He's got a shipping company, Nev Trans Freight, runs a warehouse outside Carson City. Address. I don't..." Chain stepped closer, still playing with the knife. The manager rattled off an address so fast it almost came out as one word. Bishop memorized it. Then he leaned across the counter until he was inches from the manager's face. "If I find out you called Mercer after we leave, I'm coming back. And next time, I won't ask politely. We clear?" Crystal. Bishop grabbed the phone, pulled the SIM card, and crushed it under his boot. Then he turned and walked out, the other vultures following. Back in the parking lot, snow hammered down harder than before. The wind had picked up, howling through the empty lot like something alive and angry. "You believe him?" Chains asked. "About the address?" "Yeah." "About not knowing where Clara is?" Bishop shook his head. "He knows more than he's saying, but we got what we need for now." Wraith lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his scarred face. "So we hit the warehouse?" "Not yet. If Mercer's smart, he's already got security. We go in blind, we might lose our only lead." Bishop pulled out his phone and called Reaper. The president picked up on the first ring. "Talk to me." Bishop filled him in. The manager, the trucking company, the warehouse in Carson City. Reaper listened without interrupting, the way he always did, processing information like a general planning a campaign. Nev Trans Freight, ma'am, Reaper said when Bishop finished. I know that name. They've been on the state police radar for a while, but nothing sticks. Clean on paper, dirty underneath. If they're running trafficking through freight corridors, they've got protection. What kind of protection? The kind that wears a badge. Bishop's jaw tightened. He'd suspected as much. Clara had called the cops, given them everything, and within 24 hours she was gone. That didn't happen unless someone on the inside was feeding information back to the traffickers. We can't trust local PD, Bishop said. No, we handle this ourselves. I'm making calls now, reaching out to the Reno chapter, seeing what they know about Mercer's operation. You focus on the warehouse, scout it, get eyes on the layout, figure out how many people we're dealing with. But don't engage. Not yet. Understood. And Bishop? Yeah? That girl back at the diner is counting on you. Don't get yourself killed before we finish this. The line went dead. Bishop pocketed the phone and looked at his brothers. We ride to Carson City, quiet recon. We find out what we're up against. Then we regroup and plan the extraction. They mounted their bikes and rolled out of the Sunset Motel parking lot, engines roaring into the storm. Behind them, in the motel office, the manager stood frozen behind his bulletproof glass, watching the taillights disappear into the snow. Then, very slowly, he reached for the landline phone hidden under the desk and started dialing. The warehouse sat on the outskirts of Carson City like a tombstone in the industrial wasteland. Chain-link fences topped with razor wire, sodium lights bleeding yellow across cracked pavement, and the skeletal remains of old shipping containers stacked like rusted bones. Nev Trans Freight, the sign said, bolted to the front gate in faded letters. The kind of place that looked legitimate from a distance but smelled wrong up close. Bishop and the vultures killed their engines 2 blocks out and approached on foot. 3:47 a.m. The storm had eased slightly, but the cold bit through leather like teeth. Their breath came out in white clouds. Boots crunched on frozen gravel. Wraith moved ahead of the group, silent as smoke, scanning for cameras and tripwires with the methodical precision of someone trained to hunt human targets. He came back shaking his head. 2 cameras on the main gate, motion sensors along the fence line, guard shack at the entrance, but it looks empty. How many vehicles inside? Bishop asked. 3. 2 semi-trucks parked near the loading bay. 1 black SUV near the office. The SUV. Bishop's instincts flared. That matched the description Eden gave us? Wraith nodded. Tinted windows. Same make. Then someone's here, and they found a section of fence behind a row of dead shrubs where the chain link had rusted through at the base. Chains pulled it back and they slipped through one by one, moving low and fast across open ground until they reached the shadows near the loading bay. Up close, the warehouse was massive. Corrugated metal walls, roll-up doors tall enough to fit a truck through, ventilation shafts rattling in the wind. Light spilled from a single window on the second floor. Voices drifted down, muffled but angry. Bishop motioned for the others to hold position. Then he and Wraith crept along the wall until they found a side door, rusted and barely hanging on its hinges. Unlocked. They slipped inside. The interior smelled like diesel, old cardboard, and something else, something organic and wrong, like sweat and fear soaked into concrete. Rows of metal shelving lined the main floor, stacked with boxes labeled in codes that meant nothing. Empty pallets, chains hanging from ceiling hooks. A forklift parked in the corner with its battery dead. But no people. Not down here anyway. The voices were coming from upstairs. Bishop and Wraith moved toward a metal staircase at the back of the warehouse, every step deliberate, testing weight before committing. The stairs groaned under their boots despite their caution. At the top, a narrow hallway stretched toward a door with light bleeding through the cracks. The voices got clearer. Don't care what she saw. She's a liability now. You grabbed her too fast. Don't care what she should have waited, made it look like an accident. It's handled. She's locked down. Nobody's coming for her. And the kid? The kid's scared. She'll keep her mouth shut. Bishop's fists clenched. He looked at Wraith. The sniper's expression was flat, unreadable, but his hand had drifted toward the knife on his belt. Bishop held up a fist. Wait, they needed more information, needed to know how many people were inside, where Clara was being held, what kind of security they were dealing with. Running in hot right now would get them all killed, or worse, get Clara killed before they could extract her. But every instinct screamed at him to kick that door open and start breaking things. The voice on the other side continued. Mercer wants her moved by Friday, north to Oregon, then across the border into Washington. After that, she's someone else's problem. What about the cops? Already paid off. The deputy who took her statement filed it under drunk and disorderly, marked it closed. Nobody's looking for her. Silence. Then the second voice, quieter now. You ever think about what happens to them after we hand them off? No, and neither should you. We're logistics, not daycare. They get loaded, they get moved, we get paid. That's the job. Yeah, the job. Footsteps approached the door. Bishop and Wraith melted back into the shadows at the top of the stairs, pressing against the wall just as the door swung open and two men stepped out. The first was the bald man from Eden's description, 6'2", scar over his eyebrow, brown jacket with the Nev Trans logo. The second was younger, maybe 30, with a nervous energy that screamed inexperience. The bald man pulled out a pack of cigarettes. I'm going for a smoke. You check the holding area, make sure Vale hasn't done anything stupid like trying to pick the lock. She's zip-tied to a chair. What's she gonna do? Just check. The younger man sighed and headed down a side hallway. The bald man descended the stairs toward the main floor, footsteps echoing. Bishop looked at Wraith. The sniper nodded once. They followed. The bald man stepped outside through a side exit, letting the door slam behind him. Bishop and Wraith emerged from the shadows 30 seconds later, silent as predators. The cold hit them immediately, but neither reacted. They'd both operated in worse conditions. The bald man stood 20 feet away with his back to them, lighter flaring as he lit his cigarette. Bishop moved first. He crossed the distance in 4 strides, grabbed the man by the collar, and slammed him face first into the brick wall, hard enough to crack the mortar. The cigarette fell from his lips. His knees buckled. Don't scream, Bishop said quietly, or I break your neck. The man froze. Wraith stepped up beside him, knife already in hand, the blade catching moonlight. Where's Clara Vale? I don't... Bishop slammed him into the wall again, harder this time. Wrong answer, Seth. Blood ran from the man's nose. Jesus Christ, okay, she's in the holding area. 2nd floor, east wing. How many people inside? Just me and Kyle, that's it. Nobody else works night shift. You're lying. I swear to God. Wraith pressed the knife against the man's throat. He asked you a question. The bald man's breathing went ragged. There's 2 more. Guards. In the front office. But they're watching TV. They won't hear anything back here. Bishop leaned closer. You grabbed a woman from her home, threatened her daughter. You know what that makes you? Look, man, I'm just doing my job. Your job is human trafficking. I move freight. What's in the freight isn't my problem. It is now. Bishop pulled him away from the wall and shoved him toward Wraith. Tie him up. Gag him. If he makes a sound, cut his throat. Wraith smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Bishop left them and headed back inside, adrenaline singing through his veins. The warehouse felt different now, not empty, but charged, like the air before a lightning strike. He moved through the shadows toward the east wing, every sense on high alert. He found the holding area at the end of a narrow hallway, a single metal door with a padlock. Bishop pulled a lockpick set from his jacket, a skill he'd learned years ago from a safecracker who'd done time with the club, and worked the lock in under 30 seconds. The mechanism clicked. The door swung open. Inside was darkness, and the sound of someone breathing. Clara? Bishop whispered. A sharp intake of breath. Then a voice, hoarse and terrified. Who? Who's there? Bishop stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He pulled out a small flashlight and swept the beam across the room. Clara Vale sat zip-tied to a metal chair in the corner, exactly like the photograph. Blood had dried on her face. Her wrists were raw from struggling against the restraints. She looked at Bishop with the kind of desperate hope that came from someone who'd given up on rescue and was now staring at a stranger in biker leathers holding a flashlight. I'm not here to hurt you, Bishop said quietly. Eden sent me. Clara's eyes went wide. Eden, is she... She's safe. She's with my people. Tears spilled down Clara's face. Oh, God. Oh, thank God. Bishop crossed the room and cut through the zip ties with his knife. Clara's hands fell free and she immediately tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Bishop caught her before she hit the floor. Easy. You've been sitting a long time. Your circulation's shot. I can walk. I just need a second. Take your time. We've got maybe 5 minutes before someone checks on you. Clara rubbed her wrists, wincing. There's others. In the containers outside. I heard them crying earlier. We can't just leave them. Bishop had suspected as much. But extracting one person was risky enough. Extracting multiple, some of whom might be injured, might not speak English, might panic and make noise, that was a different level of danger. How many? He asked. I don't know. 6? Maybe more. You sure? I heard them. Through the walls. Please, you can't leave them here. Bishop thought fast. The smart play was to get Clara out now, regroup with the club, and come back with more people and a solid plan. The risky play was to try extracting everyone tonight and hope it didn't turn into a firefight in a warehouse full of innocent people. Before he could answer, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Kyle's voice, nervous and too loud. Hey, you still in there? Mercer just called. He's on his way. Says we're moving her tonight instead of Friday. Bishop and Clara locked eyes. She mouthed, What do we do? Bishop motioned for her to stay silent. He moved to the door, knife in hand, and waited. The doorknob rattled. Hey, you fall asleep or something? Open up. Ich seite. Silence. Then the sound of keys jingling. The lock turned. The door swung open. Kyle stepped inside, and Bishop grabbed him by the throat, yanked him into the room, and slammed him against the wall hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. The younger man's eyes went wide with shock and terror. How many people in those containers, Arcia? Bishop asked. I don't. Bishop pressed the knife against his ribs. Answer me or I start cutting. 7. 7 people. They came in 3 days ago. Same truck that... Where are the keys? Front office. There's a lockbox. Bishop didn't wait for more. He drove his knee into Kyle's stomach, doubling him over, then caught him in a chokehold and held him until the kid went limp. Not dead. Just unconscious. Clara stared at him. Jesus Christ. Stay here. Don't move. I'll be back in 2 minutes. You're going for the others. Yeah. Alone? I've got people outside, trust me. He didn't wait for her to argue. He stepped into the hallway, pulled out his phone, and sent a quick text to Wraith. Holding area East Wing. 7 hostages in containers outside. Need keys from front office. Going loud in 90 seconds. The reply came instantly. Copy. On it. Bishop moved. He sprinted down the hallway past the stairs toward the front office where the 2 guards were supposedly watching TV and not paying attention to anything. He hit the door with his shoulder and it crashed inward. 2 men sat at a desk, fast food wrappers scattered around them. A small TV playing some late-night talk show. They looked up just as Bishop entered, their expressions going from bored to confused to alarmed in the span of a heartbeat. Bishop didn't give them time to react. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed the first guard by his collar, and threw him across the desk into the second guard. Both went down in a tangle of limbs and curses. Where are the keys to the containers? Bishop demanded. One of the guards, older, graying beard, scrambled for a gun on his belt. Bishop stomped on his wrist. Bones crunched. The guard screamed. Keys. Now. The second guard, younger and clearly smarter, pointed to a lockbox on the wall with shaking hands. There. Code is 4782. Bishop grabbed the lockbox, punched in the code, and pulled out a ring of keys. He turned to leave, and that's when the alarm went off. Loud, piercing, the kind of noise designed to wake the dead. Someone had triggered the perimeter sensors, or Mercer had arrived early. Either way, they were out of time. Bishop ran. The alarm screamed through the warehouse like a dying animal. Bishop ran through the East Wing corridor with the key ring clutched in his fist, boots hammering concrete, the sound of his own breathing loud inside his skull. Behind him, somewhere in the building's guts, voices shouted orders, guards mobilizing, radios crackling, the organized chaos of a security response that had just been activated. He hit the holding room door at full speed. Clara was standing now, pressed against the wall, eyes wide with terror. Kyle was still unconscious on the floor where Bishop had left him. We're leaving, Bishop said. Now. What about the others? I've got the keys, but we need to move fast. What? Clara didn't argue. She followed him into the hallway, limping slightly, one hand braced against the wall for balance. Bishop grabbed her arm and half pulled, half carried her toward the back stairwell. The alarm kept shrieking. Red emergency lights strobed through the darkness, turning everything into a nightmare sequence of blood-colored shadows. They hit the stairs, descended fast, burst through the ground floor door into the main warehouse, and nearly ran straight into Wraith and Chains coming from the opposite direction. Wraith had blood on his knuckles. Chains was carrying an unconscious guard over his shoulder like a sack of grain. "Front gates compromised," Wraith said, voice flat and cold. 2 vehicles just pulled in, SUV and a truck. 4 men visible, probably more. "Mercer?" Bishop asked. "Don't know." Didn't wait to ask. The alarm cut off suddenly. The silence that followed was somehow worse. Then a voice echoed through the warehouse, amplified by a megaphone or PA system, smooth and controlled and far too calm for the situation. "Whoever you are, you're making a mistake. This is private property. You're trespassing. Leave now and we won't press charges." Bishop looked at Clara. "That Mercer?" She nodded, face pale. "That's him." "He sounds like a businessman." "He is. That's what makes him dangerous." The voice continued, echoing off metal walls. "I know you think you're helping someone. Maybe you are, but you don't understand what you've walked into. This is bigger than you, bigger than whatever story you've been told. Walk away now, while you still can." Chains spat on the floor. "I say we introduce ourselves properly." "Negative," Bishop said. "We're outnumbered, and we don't know the layout well enough to fight our way out. We grab the people in those containers, and we ghost before this turns into a bloodbath." Wraith was already moving toward the loading bay doors. "Containers are outside, 50 yards across open ground. No cover." "How many hostiles between us and the containers?" "At least 4, maybe 6. Clara grabbed Bishop's arm. "You can't just leave them locked up out there. If Mercer realizes what's happening, he'll move them, or worse." Bishop knew what "or worse" meant. Execute the witnesses, burn the evidence, disappear into the night like this had never happened. He pulled out his phone and texted Reaper. "Contact compromised, multiple hostiles. Extracting hostages now, need immediate backup." The reply came back in seconds. 20 minutes out, hold position. 20 minutes might as well have been 20 hours. Bishop looked at his brothers. "We split up. Wraith, you're on overwatch. Find high ground, keep eyes on the perimeter, call out movement. Chains, you're with me. We breach the containers, get people out, move them to the fence line where we came in. Clara, you stick with Chains. You run into trouble. You do exactly what he says. Understand?" Clara nodded. Chains dumped the unconscious guard against the wall and pulled a tire iron from his belt. "What about the assholes outside? We avoid them if we can. If we can't..." Bishop met his eyes. "We do what we have to do." The unspoken agreement passed between them. No killing unless absolutely necessary. But if it came down to protecting innocent people or protecting the men who trafficked them, the choice was already made. They moved. Wraith peeled off toward a metal staircase leading to a catwalk that ran along the warehouse ceiling. Chains and Bishop headed for a side door near the loading bay, Clara between them. The emergency lights had shut off, leaving only the dim glow of sodium lamps outside bleeding through dirty windows. Bishop cracked the door open. Cold air rushed in. Snow was falling again, lighter now but steady, covering the ground in fresh white that looked almost peaceful if you ignored the razor wire and the men with guns standing near the front gate. The shipping containers sat in a row 50 yards away, massive steel boxes 20 feet long, stacked too high in some places, rusted and anonymous. Perfect for hiding cargo that wasn't supposed to exist. Perfect for making people disappear. Bishop counted 4 men near the gate, all armed. 2 with rifles, 2 with handguns visible in shoulder holsters. They were talking to someone inside the black SUV, probably Mercer, still trying to negotiate like this was a business transaction instead of a rescue operation. "I don't see a clean approach," Chains whispered. "There isn't one. We go fast and loud. Get to the containers, get people out, move before they can organize a response. And if they start shooting, then we shoot back." Bishop didn't wait for more questions. He pushed the door open and ran. Chains and Clara followed. They crossed the open ground in a dead sprint, boots crunching on gravel and snow, breath coming in white clouds. Bishop kept his eyes on the men near the gate, waiting for the shout, the gunshot, the moment this whole thing went sideways. But they made it. The first container loomed in front of them, rust-streaked and anonymous. A heavy padlock secured the door. Bishop sorted through the key ring with shaking hands, adrenaline making his fingers clumsy. Third key. Fourth. Fifth. The lock clicked open. He yanked the container door wide. The smell hit him first. Human waste, sweat, fear. The stench of people locked in darkness for days without food, water, or dignity. Then he saw them. 4 people huddled in the back corner, 3 women and 1 man, all young, all terrified. They squinted against the sudden influx of light and cold air, shielding their eyes, backing away like they expected violence. "We're not here to hurt you," Bishop said quietly. "We're getting you out." One of the women, maybe 25, with dark hair matted against her skull, spoke in accented English. "Who are you?" "Someone who gives a damn. Can you walk?" Yes, I think so." "Then move. Now. The 4 of them stumbled out of the container, blinking like they'd just been born. Clara immediately went to the youngest woman, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, whispering reassurances. Chains was already moving to the next container, trying keys. That's when the shouting started. "Hey, hey! We got movement by the containers!" Gunfire cracked across the lot. Bullets sparked off metal. Bishop shoved the rescued people toward the fence line and spun around, pulling his own weapon, a Glock he'd carried since Afghanistan, worn and reliable and loaded with hollow points that would stop a man cold. He didn't fire. Not yet. The guards were running toward them now, rifles up, boots pounding gravel. 2 of them. The other 2 stayed near the gate, probably covering Mercer. Chains got the second container open. 3 more people inside, 2 men, 1 woman, all of them barely conscious, dehydrated, in bad shape. "Get them moving!" Bishop shouted. Clara and the first group of rescued people were already at the fence, slipping through the gap Wraith had opened earlier. But the second group was slower. One of the men could barely stand. The woman was crying, shaking so hard she couldn't walk straight. The guards were 30 yards out and closing. "Stop right there!" one of them yelled. "Drop your weapons!" Bishop stood his ground between the guards and the container. "These people aren't cargo. They're human beings. You want them. You go through me." The guard's finger twitched on the trigger. Everything slowed down. Bishop saw it happening, the minute shift in the man's posture, the tightening of his grip, the breath he took before squeezing. And then the guard's head snapped sideways and he dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The second guard spun around, confused, searching for the threat. Another shot. Another body hitting the ground. Wraith. Bishop looked up and saw the sniper silhouetted on the catwalk inside the warehouse. Rifle braced against his shoulder. Scope pressed to his eye. Wraith didn't wave. Didn't acknowledge the kills. Just cycled the bolt and scanned for the next target. "Move!" Bishop grabbed the nearest rescued person and half-dragged them toward the fence. Chains did the same with the others. They ran across open ground while snow fell and gunfire erupted behind them. The 2 guards near the gate finally engaging, bullets whining through the air like angry hornets. Bishop didn't look back. He just ran. They hit the fence, pushed people through the gap. Chains went through last, bleeding from a graze across his shoulder but still moving. Bishop followed, and then they were outside the perimeter, running through the industrial wasteland beyond. The rescued people stumbling through snow and darkness while sirens wailed in the distance. Real sirens this time. Police. Someone had called it in. Bishop's phone buzzed. He checked it without stopping. Reaper. Cops inbound. Abort extraction. Scatter and regroup at Safe House Charlie. Safe House. Charlie was an abandoned gas station 40 miles south. They'd used it before for meets that couldn't happen in public. Bishop knew the route by heart. But first they had to get these people somewhere safe. He stopped running and turned to face the group. 10 people. 7 rescued from the containers. Clara, Chains, and himself. All of them breathing hard, scared, bleeding in some cases. "Listen to me," Bishop said. "Police are coming. You talk to them, you tell them everything. Names, faces, what happened. Don't protect anyone. Don't be scared. You're safe now. Understand?" The dark-haired woman who'd spoken earlier nodded. "What about you?" We were never here. But you saved us. We were never here, Bishop repeated. He looked at Clara. You good? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. God, thank you. Thank me by getting your daughter and leaving Nevada tonight. Don't go home. Don't pack. Just grab Eden and drive until you hit another state. Find somewhere safe and stay there. Where, doesn't matter. Anywhere but here. Sirens were getting louder. Blue lights flashed through the snow in the distance. Bishop grabbed chains and they melted into the darkness, leaving the rescued people standing in the snow like ghosts waiting to be found. They ran through alleys, over fences, through the skeletal remains of dead businesses until they found their bikes where they'd hidden them 2 blocks from the warehouse. Wraith was already there, rifle disassembled and packed away, face expressionless. They didn't speak, just mounted up and rode. Engines roared through the frozen night. Chrome flashed under streetlights. They split up at the first intersection, Wraith going east, Chains going west, Bishop heading south towards Safe House Charlie. Behind them, the warehouse was chaos. Police lights, ambulances, news vans probably already circling like vultures. And somewhere in that mess, Royce Mercer was realizing he'd just lost 7 pieces of merchandise, and 2 of his guards were dead. Bishop twisted the throttle and disappeared into the storm. Basque, Safe House. Charlie was exactly what it sounded like. A gutted Chevron station on the edge of nowhere, boarded windows and a collapsed awning, pump islands overgrown with weeds. The Iron Vultures owned it through a shell company nobody could trace back to the club. Perfect for meets that needed to stay off the radar. Bishop arrived just after 5 a.m. The eastern sky was starting to gray with dawn. The storm had passed, leaving everything covered in fresh snow that looked clean and innocent in the early light. 12 motorcycles sat in formation near the garage bay. The rest of the club had arrived before him. He killed his engine and walked inside. The garage smelled like motor oil and old concrete. A space heater glowed in the corner, barely making a dent in the cold. The vultures were scattered around the room in various states of exhaustion, some sitting on overturned crates, some leaning against walls, some smoking in silence. Reaper stood near the heater, arms crossed, gray beard dusted with snow. He looked at Bishop, didn't say anything, just looked. Bishop pulled off his gloves. We got them out, all 7, plus Clara Vale. I know. It's all over the news. Reaper's voice was flat, controlled. The kind of control that came right before an explosion. 2 dead guards, 10 rescued hostages. Police calling it a violent confrontation with unknown assailants. You know what that means? It means we did the right thing. It means we just painted a target on the club's back. The temperature in the room dropped. Other vultures were watching now. Chains stood near the door, shoulder bandaged, face unreadable. Wraith sat on a crate cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. A few of the younger members, men who'd only been patched in recently, looked nervous. We saved those people, Bishop said quietly. That's what matters. What matters, Reaper said, voice getting harder, is that we operate in the shadows. We don't make headlines, we don't leave bodies behind, and we sure as hell don't start wars with traffickers who've got police protection. So we should have just left them there. Let Mercer move them across state lines and disappear them? We should have been smart about it. Should have taken time to plan the extraction properly instead of running in hot and hoping for the best. Mushates. There wasn't time. Mercer was moving her tonight, and now Mercer knows someone hit his operation. He's going to come looking, and when he does, he's not going to care that we saved a bunch of people. He's going to care that we cost him money and made him look weak. Reaper stepped closer. You put the entire club at risk, Bishop, for one woman and her kid. The words hit like a punch. Bishop's jaw tightened. You saying we shouldn't have helped? I'm saying you got attached. Again, just like you always do. Silence. The rest of the club wasn't even pretending not to listen now. That girl reminded you of Sarah, Reaper continued. I get it, I do, but you can't save your daughter by saving every kid who walks through the door looking for help. That's not how this works. Don't. Bishop's voice went cold. Don't bring Sarah into this. She's already in it. She's been in it since the moment Eden handed you that Polaroid. You saw your dead daughter in that 12-year-old's eyes and you stopped thinking straight. I was thinking just fine. Bullshit. You went rogue. Made decisions without consulting the club. Got 2 people killed and put us all on Mercer's radar. That's not leadership. That's grief wearing a leather cut and pretending it's justice. Bishop took a step forward. You want to say that again? Reaper didn't back down. Didn't even blink. You're compromised. Have been for 6 years, and it's going to get someone killed. Maybe you, maybe one of your brothers. But it's coming. The room went dead silent. Bishop could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on him, could feel the old rage rising up from the dark place where he kept it locked away. The rage that came from losing Sarah, from watching her grave disappear beneath dirt while rain hammered his helmet, from coming home to an empty house and realizing that the war had taken everything that mattered. He wanted to hit Reaper, wanted to put his fist through the old man's face and make him take it back, but he didn't. Because Reaper was right. He had gotten attached to Eden, had seen Sarah and her bruised wrists and terrified eyes, had made decisions based on emotion instead of strategy, and now the club was exposed. Bishop turned and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Reaper asked. To clear my head. We're not done talking. Yeah, we are. He pushed through the door and stepped into the cold morning air. Snow crunched under his boots. His breath came out in white clouds. He walked to his bike, threw a leg over, and sat there for a long time staring at nothing. Behind him, inside the garage, he could hear voices, arguing, Chains defending him. Someone else, sounded like one of the enforcers, saying maybe Reaper had a point. The low rumble of debate that always followed controversial decisions. Bishop pulled out a cigarette, lit it. Smoked in silence while dawn broke across the Nevada wasteland. He thought about Sarah, about the last time he'd held her. She'd been so small, fragile, burning up with fever. The doctors had already told him there was nothing they could do, that the infection had spread too fast, that he should say goodbye. He'd held her hand and told her stories, about princesses and dragons, about brave knights who never gave up, about how Daddy was going to come home from the war and everything was going to be okay. She'd believed him, right up until the moment she stopped breathing. And Bishop had been standing outside smoking a cigarette when it happened. The nurse had come running, shouting for him, but by the time he got back inside, Sarah was already gone. He'd missed it, missed the last 60 seconds of his daughter's life, because he needed nicotine more than he needed to be there. That was 6 years ago. He still hadn't forgiven himself. Probably never would. The garage door opened. Chains walked out, shoulder bandaged, face hard. He didn't say anything, just stood there in the snow next to Bishop's bike. After a while, Bishop spoke. He's right, you know. I did get attached. So what? Kid needed help? We helped her. It wasn't strategic. It was personal. Everything we do is personal. That's the whole point. Chains lit his own cigarette. You think Reaper started this club because it was smart business? He did it because the world chewed him up and spit him out, and he decided broken men needed a place to belong. That's personal. This is different. How? Because I'm making decisions that affect everyone, and I'm making them for the wrong reasons. Chains was quiet for a moment. Then, you remember Tucson 3 years ago? Bishop remembered. A young woman had come to the club asking for help. Her ex-boyfriend was stalking her, threatening her. The police had done nothing. Reaper had wanted to stay out of it. Too messy, too risky, not their problem. But Chains had insisted, had gone to the woman's apartment and waited. When the ex showed up with a knife, Chains put him in the hospital for 3 months. Reaper was pissed at you for weeks, Bishop said. Yeah, and you know what he told me afterward? He said, you got lucky. Next time you might not. But he never said I was wrong for helping her. Chains exhaled smoke. Point is, we're all carrying shit. We're all making decisions based on people we lost or failed or couldn't save. That's not weakness. That's what makes us human. Doesn't make it smart. Smart is overrated. Smart gets you a desk job and a mortgage and a slow death behind a keyboard. We didn't join this club to be smart. We joined because we couldn't live any other way. Bishop finished his cigarette and crushed it under his boot. Mercer's going to retaliate. Probably. Could get ugly. Definitely will. And you're okay with that? Chains looked at him. Brother, I've been okay with dying since I came back from Fallujah and realized I didn't recognize the man in the mirror anymore. If it happens protecting people who can't protect themselves, that's a better death than most of us deserve. Before Bishop could respond, Wraith emerged from the garage. The sniper's face was unreadable as always, but something in his posture had changed, sharper, more alert. We've got a problem, Wraith said. Bishop stood. What kind of problem? The news is running the story. Rescued hostages, dead guards, the whole thing. But they're also running something else. He pulled out his phone and turned it so Bishop could see the screen. It was a news article. The headline read, Missing Woman and Daughter Sought in Connection with Warehouse Incident. Below it, 2 photographs. Clara Vale and Eden. Bishop felt his stomach drop. What the hell is this? Police are calling them persons of interest, saying they want to question them in connection with the deaths of the 2 guards. There's already a bolo out on Clara's vehicle. Wraith scrolled down. Gets worse. Article mentions that Clara was last seen at the Dusty Rose Diner on E80, Jolene's place. Shit. If the cops are looking for them, that means Mercer got to someone, Bishop finished. Flipped the narrative. Made Clara and Eden look like suspects instead of victims. Chain swore under his breath. That's dirty even for traffickers. Wraith nodded. But effective. Now every cop in Nevada is looking for them. And if Mercer's got police on his payroll, he'll know the second they surface. Bishop's mind raced. He'd told Clara to grab Eden and run, get out of Nevada, find somewhere safe. But if there was a BOLO out, every state trooper between here and the border would be watching for her vehicle. She wouldn't make it 50 miles before getting pulled over. And if she got pulled over and the wrong cop made the call, Mercer would know exactly where she was. We need to find them first, Bishop said. Before the cops do, before Mercer does. How? Chains asked. We don't know where they went. Jolene might. Clara was at the diner. She might have said something, mentioned a destination, anything. And if she didn't? Bishop didn't have an answer for that. He walked back into the garage. The arguing had stopped. Everyone turned to look at him. Reaper stood near the heater, arms still crossed, expression unreadable. We've got a new problem, Bishop said. He explained about the BOLO, the news article, the fact that Clara and Eden were now wanted by police. The room went cold. One of the younger members spoke up. So we're just supposed to let them get arrested? No, Bishop said. We're going to find them before that happens. Reaper shook his head. You don't know when to quit, do you? They're innocent, you know that. Doesn't matter what I know, matters what the cops think. And right now, the cops think they're connected to 2 dead bodies. Reaper's voice was hard. You keep chasing this, you're going to drag the entire club down with you. Then I'll do it alone. Silence. Every vulture in that garage stared at Bishop. Say that again, Reaper said quietly. I'm not asking the club to get involved. This is on me. I'll find Clara and Eden. I'll get them somewhere safe. The rest of you can walk away clean. That's not how this works. It is, if I say it is. Reaper's jaw tightened. You take off your cut. You're not a vulture anymore. You understand that? Bishop's hand moved to the leather jacket, the cut he'd worn for 8 years, patched with the club's insignia, worn smooth from highway miles and hard weather. It was the only family he had left, the only thing that made him feel like he belonged somewhere. Taking it off meant exile, meant being alone again. But he thought about Eden, about Sarah, about the promise he had made standing over his daughter's grave in the rain. His fingers found the zipper, started pulling it down. Don't. Chain stepped forward. Don't do this, brother. I have to. No, you don't. We're a club. We stick together. Not on this. Reaper's right. This is my fight. Bishop pulled off the cut. The garage went dead silent. He folded the leather carefully and set it on a crate. Then he turned and walked toward the door, wearing just a black shirt and jeans, looking smaller somehow without the weight of the club on his shoulders. Bishop? Reaper called. He stopped but didn't turn around. You walk out that door without your cut. You're on your own. No backup, no support, no brotherhood. You clear? Crystal. And when Mercer comes for you, and he will come, you can't call us for help. I know. Bishop stepped through the door and into the morning light. Behind him, he heard voices rising again, arguing, debating, some of them angry, some of them hurt. He heard Chains shouting something about loyalty, heard Wraith's quiet voice cutting through the noise. But he didn't stop. He walked to his bike, threw a leg over, fired the engine, and rode away from the only family he had left, chasing ghosts through the frozen Nevada wasteland, knowing that before this was over, someone was going to die. Maybe him, maybe Eden, maybe everyone. But he was done running from the past, done letting fear make his decisions. Sarah was gone. He couldn't save her, couldn't bring her back. But Eden was still alive, and as long as she was breathing, Bishop was going to protect her, even if it killed him. The Dusty Rose Diner looked different in daylight, less threatening, more sad. Just a dying relic on the edge of a highway nobody used anymore. Paint peeling, neon sign dark. Windows filmed with decades of road grit. Bishop pulled into the lot just after 7 a.m. 2 cars sat near the entrance, probably early morning truckers grabbing coffee before the next haul. He parked his bike and walked inside. Jolene stood behind the counter pouring coffee, same as always. She looked up when he entered and her expression flickered. Surprise, then concern, then something that looked almost like relief. "Wondered when you'd show up," she said. Bishop slid into a booth. "You see the news?" "Hard to miss. Every channel's running the story." She brought over a mug and filled it without asking. "That girl and her mother, they in trouble?" "The bad kind. Police are looking for them. So is the man who grabbed Clara in the first place." Jolene set the pot down and lowered her voice. "She was here last night, around midnight. Came in with the girl. Both of them looked scared half to death." Bishop's pulse quickened. "What did she say?" "Asked if I knew anywhere safe they could go. Somewhere out of state. I told her I had a cousin in Idaho. Runs a motel near Boise. Off the grid, doesn't ask questions." "You give her an address?" "Better. Gave her my cousin's number and told her to call from a payphone." Jolene paused. "But she never made it." "How do you know?" "Because my cousin called me an hour ago, asking why I'd given his number to a woman who never showed up." Bishop's stomach clenched. "She say where she was going?" "North. That's all I know. She had maybe a quarter tank of gas. Said she needed to stop somewhere and fill up before hitting the highway." "What kind of vehicle?" "Old Civic. Green. Looked like it was held together with duct tape and prayers." Bishop stood. "There a gas station between here and the Idaho border?" 3. But only one of them's open 24 hours. Truck stop off exit 72, about 40 miles north. Bishop pulled out his wallet and dropped 2 20s on the counter. "That's too much," Jolene said, "for the coffee, and for not telling anyone we had this conversation." "I don't talk to cops if I can help it." "Good. Because if the wrong people find out you helped Clara and Eden, they'll come asking questions." Jolene's face hardened. "Let them come. I've been running this diner for 40 years, seen things that'd make your skin crawl. I'm not scared of some suit-wearing trafficker." Bishop almost smiled. "Almost. You're tougher than most of the men I know." "Damn right I am." He turned to leave. "Bishop," Jolene called. He stopped. "That girl, Eden. She reminds you of someone, doesn't she?" He kicked. Bishop didn't answer, didn't need to. Jolene just nodded. "Thought so. You be careful out there. Men who fight for the wrong reasons get killed. But men who fight for the right reasons, they get killed too. Just slower." Bishop walked out into the morning light and mounted his bike. 40 miles north, exit 72. He twisted the throttle and rode. Bonk. The truck stop at exit 72 was bigger than Bishop expected. 20 pumps. A convenience store. A diner attached to one side. Rigs parked in neat rows behind the main building. Drivers sleeping as their cabs or grabbing showers in the facilities. The whole place hummed with the low energy of people passing through, going somewhere else, never staying long enough to matter. Bishop pulled in and killed his engine, scanned the lot. No green Civic. But near the edge of the property, partially hidden behind a dumpster, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Tire tracks in the snow, fresh ones, leading away from the lot and into the access road that ran parallel to the highway. And next to the tracks, In the pristine white snow, a small backpack, torn. The same one Eden had been carrying when she walked into the Dusty Rose Diner 2 nights ago. Bishop dismounted and walked over, picked up the backpack. Inside, a few clothes, a toothbrush, and a photograph. Not the Polaroid of Clara tied to the chair. A different photo. Older. Eden and her mother standing in front of a Christmas tree, both smiling, both looking like they believed the world was a safe place. Bishop stared at the photo for a long time. Then he looked at the tire tracks leading away into the snow. 2 sets. One smaller, probably the Civic. One larger. Heavy treads, commercial vehicle, SUV maybe, or a truck. Someone had followed Clara and Eden here, waited for them to stop, and grabbed them. Bishop pulled out his phone. No signal. He ran back to his bike, fired the engine, and followed the tire tracks into the access road. The snow was getting deeper here, harder to navigate, but the tracks were clear enough. They led away from the highway into the back roads, toward the empty stretches of Nevada where nobody lived and nobody heard screaming. He rode fast. Wind bit his face. Engine roared. Chrome flashed under gray skies. The tracks led him 5 miles into the wasteland before they turned off onto a dirt road barely visible beneath the snow. Bishop slowed, scanning for threats. Nothing visible. Just frozen desert, dead brush, and the distant silhouette of an abandoned building rising from the landscape like a rotten tooth. The tracks led straight to it. Bishop killed his engine 100 yards out and approached on foot. The building was an old processing plant. Maybe meatpacking, maybe something worse. Corrugated metal walls streaked with rust. Broken windows. A loading dock with the doors hanging open. The kind of place where bad things happened and nobody ever found the evidence. He pulled his Glock and moved toward the building. No sound except wind. No movement. He reached the loading dock, peered inside, darkness. Then, from somewhere deep in the building, a scream. High-pitched, terrified. A child's scream. Eden. Bishop didn't think. He ran. Burst through the loading dock doors into the darkness, boots hammering concrete, weapon raised, and walked straight into a trap. Lights flooded on. Blinding. 5 men stepped out of the shadows, all armed, all pointing weapons directly at him. And in the center of the room, tied to chairs just like in the Polaroid, Clara and Eden, both alive, both terrified. A man stepped forward from behind the lights. Tall, well-dressed, expensive coat, gray hair slicked back. He looked like a businessman, like someone who closed deals and shook hands and smiled for cameras. But his eyes were dead. "Mr. Crow," the man said, polite, controlled. "I've been waiting for you." Bishop didn't lower his weapon. "Mercer." "My mate." "Guilty." Royce Mercer smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You've caused me considerable trouble. 7 lost assets. 2 dead employees. A police investigation. Do you have any idea how much that costs?" "Don't care." "No, I didn't think you would. Men like you never care about consequences. You just act. Charge in like heroes without thinking about what happens after. Let them go." "I don't think so. See, I have a reputation to maintain. And if word gets out that some biker trash raided my operation and walked away clean, that's bad for business. Very bad." Bishop's finger tightened on the trigger. "You hurt them. I'll kill you." Mercer laughed. "You're outnumbered 5-1. You won't even get a shot off before my men put you down." "Maybe, but I'll take you with me." The smile faded from Mercer's face. "You really are willing to die for them?" "Yeah." "Why?" "They're nobody. A cleaning woman and her daughter. Why throw your life away?" Bishop looked at Eden. She was crying, bruised, terrified, but she was alive, and that was enough. "Because," Bishop said quietly, "somebody has to." Mercer studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded to one of his men. "Kill him." The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. But it wasn't Bishop who got hit. It was one of Mercer's guards. The man dropped, a hole in his chest, blood spreading across concrete. Then chaos. More gunshots. Men screaming. Bishop dove behind a stack of crates as bullets tore through the air where he'd been standing. He fired twice, center mass, controlled bursts, and another guard went down. But then he saw them. Motorcycles roaring through the loading dock entrance. headlights cutting through smoke and darkness. The iron vultures. 18 of them, led by Reaper. They came in like a wave of leather and chrome and violence, bikes skidding to stops, men dismounting with weapons raised, the garage bay erupting into a firefight that was brutal and fast and utterly one-sided. Wraith appeared on a catwalk overhead, rifle barking. Chains charged through the smoke with a tire iron, cracking skulls like melons. And Reaper walked calmly through the carnage, handgun up, face carved from stone, putting rounds into anyone stupid enough to point a weapon at his brothers. It was over in 90 seconds. 4 of Mercer's men dead. The 5th on his knees, hands behind his head, begging for mercy. And Mercer himself, backed against the wall, staring at Bishop. Bishop walked toward him slowly, boots crunching on broken glass, gun raised. "You made a mistake," Bishop said quietly. Wait. We can work this out? You hurt a kid, threatened her mother. You don't walk away from that. I have money, connections. I can make you rich." Bishop fired. Once. The shot echoed through the building. Mercer slumped against the wall, eyes wide, blood spreading across his expensive coat. He tried to speak. Couldn't. Just died. Silence. Bishop lowered his weapon and turned to Eden and Clara. Reaper was already cutting them free. Eden stumbled out of the chair and ran straight to Bishop, throwing her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. He held her awkwardly, gun still in one hand, not sure what to do. Not sure how to comfort a child when he'd failed so completely to protect his own. But he tried. "You're safe," he whispered. "You're safe now." Clara stood on shaking legs, looking at the carnage around them, at the dead men, at the bikers standing in the smoke. What happens now?" she asked. Reaper holstered his weapon. "Now you disappear. New names, new town. We've got people who can make that happen." He looked at Bishop. "And you put your goddamn cut back on." Bishop met his eyes. Reaper's expression was hard, unforgiving, but his hand was extended, holding Bishop's leather cut. "You're an idiot," Reaper said. "A reckless, grief-stricken idiot who makes terrible decisions." "I know but you're our idiot." Reaper's voice softened, just slightly. "And we don't leave brothers behind. Not ever." Bishop took the cut, put it on, felt the weight settle across his shoulders like coming home. Around them, the other vultures were already moving, cleaning the scene, wiping prints, preparing to ghost before police arrived. Professional, efficient, like they'd done this 100 times before, which they probably had. Bishop looked down at Eden. "You ready to start over?" She nodded, still crying. "Good, because the road's long, and it's hard, but you don't have to walk it alone anymore." And somewhere in the frozen Nevada morning, as sirens wailed in the distance and the iron vultures prepared to disappear into the wasteland like they'd never existed, Bishop Crow finally understood something he'd been running from for 6 years. He couldn't save Sarah. Couldn't bring her back, couldn't undo the past. But he could still protect the living. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The safe house was a hunting cabin buried in the mountains 60 miles from nowhere. No cell service, no power lines. Just a generator that coughed diesel smoke into the frozen air and a wood stove that barely kept the temperature above freezing. The iron vultures had used it before for situations exactly like this. When the heat got too high, when bodies dropped, when disappearing was the only play left. Bishop stood on the porch smoking while dawn broke across the mountain peaks. His hands were still shaking. Not from cold, from adrenaline crash, from the memory of Mercer's eyes going wide when the bullet punched through his chest, from the weight of what he'd just done. He'd killed before. Afghanistan had made sure of that. But this was different. This was execution, cold, deliberate, looking a man in the eyes and pulling the trigger because that man had threatened a child. Bishop didn't regret it. That's what scared him. Behind him, inside the cabin, he could hear voices. Reaper on a sat phone coordinating with other chapters. Chains and Wraith cleaning weapons. Someone making coffee that smelled like burnt rubber. Clara and Eden were in the back room, door closed, probably sleeping or trying to. The girl had barely spoken since they left the processing plant. Just stared out the window of the van they'd used to transport her and her mother, eyes glazed, shock settling in like frost on glass. Bishop knew that look, had worn it himself once, The look of someone who just watched their understanding of the world shatter and was trying to figure out how to keep breathing in the aftermath. The cabin door opened. Reaper stepped out, sat phone in hand, face grim. "We've got a problem," he said. Bishop didn't turn around. "Another one?" Mercer wasn't independent. He was middle management. "I figured." "You figured wrong about who he reported to." Reaper lit a cigarette, hands steady despite everything. "I just got off the phone with our contact in Reno PD. The trafficking network Mercer was running? It's not just freight corridors and truck stops. It's connected to something bigger, federal level." Bishop turned slowly. "How federal?" "The kind that has three-letter acronyms and unlimited budgets." Reaper exhaled smoke. Mercer was moving product for a task force that's supposed to be fighting trafficking, not running it. The words hung in the frozen air like poison. Bishop felt something cold slide down his spine. "You're saying cops are running the network?" "Not cops. Feds. Using the infrastructure to move people across state lines under the cover of anti-trafficking operations. Perfect setup. They control the investigations. They control the evidence. And anyone who gets too close either gets bought off or disappears. And we just killed one of their operators." "Yeah, so." Bishop crushed his cigarette under his boot. "How deep does this go? Don't know yet. But if it's federal, it's organized, which means they've got resources we don't. Money, manpower, legal cover." Reaper's jaw tightened. "And they're going to come for us hard." Inside the cabin, something crashed. Both men spun toward the door. Chains burst through, face pale. "We've got incoming. 3 vehicles, half a mile out and closing fast." "How many people?" "Can't tell, but they're not trying to hide. Just driving straight up the access road like they own the place." Reaper was already moving. "Everyone up, weapons ready, defensive positions. Now." The cabin erupted into controlled chaos. Vultures grabbed rifles, shotguns, handguns. Someone killed the lights. Someone else doused the generator. Within 30 seconds, the cabin went dark and silent, except for the sound of 18 men breathing hard and checking ammunition. Bishop grabbed his Glock and moved to the window. Through the trees, he could see headlights cutting through the morning mist. 3 black SUVs rolling up the mountain road in formation. Professional, military precision. "That's not Mercer's people," Bishop said quietly. "No." Wraith agreed from his position near the door. "That's federal." The SUVs stopped 50 yards from the cabin. Doors opened, men stepped out. Not just men, tactical operators. Body armor, helmets, AR-15S with optics. They moved like a SWAT team, fanning out into cover positions, establishing a perimeter with the kind of efficiency that came from training and live combat experience. Bishop counted 12 of them, against 18 bikers armed with whatever they'd grabbed on the way out of town. The odds weren't good. One of the operators stepped forward, unarmed, hands visible. He was older than the others, maybe 50, gray hair buzzed military short, wearing a suit under his tactical vest. He stopped 20 yards from the cabin and called out in a voice that carried across the clearing. "Iron Vultures. My name is Special Agent Carson Webb, FBI. You're surrounded and outgunned. Come out with your hands up and nobody gets hurt." Inside the cabin, nobody moved. Reaper looked at Bishop. "You believe him?" "No, me neither." Webb called out again. "We know you're in there. We know you have Clara Vale and her daughter. We're not here to arrest anyone. We just want to talk." Bishop moved to the door and cracked it open. "Talk about what?" "About Royce Mercer. About what happened at the processing plant. About the situation you've put yourselves in." Webb's voice was calm, reasonable. The kind of voice negotiators used when they were trying to de-escalate. "You killed a federal asset, Mr. Crow. That's a problem. But it's a problem we can solve if everyone stays calm." Federal asset?" Bishop's voice went hard. "He was a trafficker." "You said, He was an informant working undercover for a task force investigating trafficking networks across the western states. You killed him. You compromised an 18-month operation. You released 7 individuals who were supposed to remain in custody as part of an ongoing investigation." Webb paused. "And now you're harboring 2 witnesses who can tie you to multiple homicides." The words hit Bishop like a sledgehammer. Informant, undercover, federal operation. He looked back at Reaper. The president's face had gone stone cold. He's lying, Bishop said. Maybe, maybe not. Reaper moved to the window, scanning the tree line. But if he's telling the truth, we just fucked up bigger than I thought possible. Webb continued, I understand why you did what you did. You thought you were saving those people. You thought Mercer was the bad guy. But the world isn't that simple. Sometimes the only way to catch monsters is to let smaller fish swim. His voice hardened slightly. You interfered with a federal operation. That carries serious consequences. But I'm authorized to offer you a deal. What kind of deal? Bishop called back. You turn over Clara and Eden Vale. You surrender your weapons and submit to questioning. In exchange, I'll make sure the charges get reduced. Manslaughter instead of murder. Conspiracy instead of racketeering. Some of you might even walk. Silence. Inside the cabin, the vultures were looking at each other. Some faces showed doubt, some showed anger. Chains was shaking his head slowly, hand tight on his shotgun. Claire's voice came from the back room, quiet and scared. Don't believe him, but... Bishop turned. Clara stood in the doorway, Eden behind her, both of them looking small and terrified. He's lying, Clara said. Mercer wasn't an informant. He was a trafficker. I heard him talking to his people. He was planning to move us across state lines and sell us. Her voice cracked. That man out there is part of it, part of the network. Webb must have heard her because his voice changed. Got colder. Mrs. Vale, your testimony is unreliable. You're in shock. You don't know what you saw. A pause. Come out now, and we'll make sure you get medical treatment. Psychiatric evaluation. Help. Help, Claire repeated bitterly. Like the help I got when I reported what I saw to the police? Like the help that got me kidnapped and tied to a chair? That was unfortunate. That was you! Clara's voice rose, shaking with rage. You people protected him. You made me disappear. You would have killed me if these men hadn't shown up. Silence outside. Then Webb's voice again, all pretense of reasonableness gone. Last chance. Come out or we come in. Reaper looked at Bishop. Your call, brother. We can fight or we can surrender. But if we fight, some of us aren't walking away. Bishop thought about Eden, about Sarah, about the promise he'd made. Then he thought about Webb's eyes when he said informant. The way they'd flickered just slightly, the tell of someone selling a story they didn't quite believe themselves. Clara was right. Webb was dirty, and surrendering meant letting him take Clara and Eden back into the network, back to the people who'd grabbed them in the first place. We fight, Bishop said quietly. Reaper nodded once. Then we fight smart. Wraith, you're on the ridge. Take anyone who gets close to the cabin. Chains, you and the enforcers cover the sides. Everyone else, inside, windows and doors. Controlled fire only. Don't waste ammunition. The vultures moved into position. Bishop grabbed Clara and Eden and pulled them into the back room. Stay on the floor. Stay away from windows. No matter what you hear, don't move. They're going to kill you, Eden whispered. Maybe. But they're not getting you. That's a promise. He closed the door and returned to the main room. Outside, Webb had retreated to the SUVs. The tactical operators were advancing now, moving through the trees in coordinated pairs, using cover, professional and patient. Bishop took position at a window, watched them come, thought about Afghanistan, about Sarah, about all the times he'd faced death and wondered why he kept surviving when better men didn't. Maybe this was why. Maybe his whole broken life had been leading to this moment, standing between a child and the people who wanted to hurt her. The first operator reached the tree line. Wraith's rifle cracked from the ridge. The operator dropped, and then the forest erupted into gunfire. The firefight was chaos. Bullets punched through cabin walls, sending splinters flying. Windows shattered. Someone screamed, one of the younger vultures taking a round in the shoulder. Chains returned fire with his shotgun, the boom deafening in the enclosed space. Smoke from discharged weapons filled the air, thick and choking. Bishop fired controlled bursts through the window, keeping the advancing operators pinned behind cover. He couldn't see Wraith on the ridge anymore, but he could hear the sniper's rifle barking steadily, methodical as a metronome. Every shot meant another operator down or forced into cover, but there were too many of them. And they had better weapons, better armor, better training. One of the SUV's doors opened, and someone inside started firing a mounted machine gun. Heavy caliber. The rounds tore through the cabin like it was made of paper. Wood exploded. The stove took a hit and collapsed in a shower of sparks. One of the vultures, a kid named Razor who'd only been patched in 6 months ago, caught a round in the chest and went down hard, blood spreading across the floor. "We can't hold this position," Chain shouted over the gunfire. "We need to fall back." "Fall back where?" Reaper fired his handgun out a side window. "We're surrounded." Bishop's mind raced. They were trapped, outgunned, running out of ammunition. In maybe 5 minutes, the operators would realize the bikers were pinned and just storm the cabin. When that happened, it was over. Unless... Bishop looked at the back room where Clara and Eden were hiding. Then he looked at the floor. The cabin was old, built in the 60s, which meant... "There's a crawl space under the cabin," Bishop shouted. "Access panel in the back room." Reaper's eyes went wide. "You sure?" "Saw it when we first got here. Leads out to the north side, away from the road." "How many people can fit?" "2, maybe 3 if they're small." Reaper understood immediately. Clara and Eden, and someone to get them clear. "You." "No, I'm staying. You need every gun you've got." "Bishop, I'm not arguing. Get them out. The rest of us will hold long enough for you to clear the perimeter." Bishop ejected his magazine, checked the count. 4 rounds left. He slammed it back in. "After that, we scatter. Meet at Rally Point Delta in 48 hours. Rally Point Delta was an abandoned warehouse in Utah, 300 miles east. Far enough that the feds wouldn't expect them to run that direction. If any of them made it that far. Reaper grabbed Bishop's shoulder. "You die here. I'm going to be pissed." "I'll keep that in mind." Reaper moved to the back room. Bishop heard him talking to Clara in low, urgent tones. Heard the access panel being pried open. Heard Eden crying softly. Outside, the gunfire had slowed. The operators were regrouping, preparing for the final push. Bishop checked his ammunition again. 4 rounds. Not enough. Never enough. He thought about Sarah one more time. About her gap-toothed smile. About the promise he'd made over her grave. Then he stood up and moved to the door. Chains grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" "Well, buying time. That's suicide." "Probably." Bishop opened the door and stepped outside. The gunfire stopped. Every operator in the clearing swung their weapons toward him. Laser sights painted red dots across his chest. 20 different ways to die, all pointed at him simultaneously. Bishop raised his hand slowly. Gun still in his right hand, finger off the trigger, barrel pointed at the ground. Webb stepped out from behind one of the SUVs. "Smart choice, Mr. Crow. I want to make a deal." "You're in no position to negotiate. I'm the only witness to what happened at the processing plant. Clara Vale and her daughter were unconscious. They didn't see me kill Mercer. But I did. And I can testify to that in court." Bishop's voice was steady. "You want to close this case clean? You need me." Webb studied him. "What are you proposing?" "I surrender. Right now. You let the others go. They scatter. You never see them again. I take the fall for everything. And the Vales? And they disappear. Witness protection. Real protection, not whatever bullshit network you're running." Webb's expression didn't change. "You think I'm dirty? I know you're dirty. The only question is whether you're smart enough to take a win when it's offered." For a long moment, Webb said nothing. Then he smiled. It was the coldest smile Bishop had ever seen. "Here's what's actually going to happen," Webb said quietly. "You're going to put your weapon down and get on your knees. Then my men are going to enter that cabin and extract Clara and Eden Vale. Then we're going to burn this place to the ground with everyone inside it. And tomorrow morning, the news will report that a domestic terrorist organization engaged federal agents in a firefight and was neutralized. End of story." Bishop's blood went cold. "You can't." Bishop's, "I can. I am. Because Royce Mercer wasn't an informant, Mr. Crow. You were right about that. He was a trafficker. But he was my trafficker, and you killed him, which means you cost me millions of dollars in lost revenue." Webb's voice hardened. "This isn't about justice. This is about protecting an operation that's been running for 10 years. And you're just collateral damage. Behind Webb, the operators were advancing again. Bishop's mind raced. He was out of time, out of options. He looked down at the gun in his hand. 4 rounds, not enough to fight 12 operators, but maybe enough to take out Webb. Bishop's finger moved toward the trigger. And then the forest exploded. Not with gunfire, with engines. Motorcycle engines. Dozens of them. Roaring through the trees from every direction like mechanical thunder, headlights cutting through the morning mist, chrome flashing in the weak sunlight. The operators spun around, weapons tracking the sound, trying to figure out where it was coming from. But it was everywhere. Bikes poured into the clearing from the north, south, and east. Not just iron vultures. Other clubs. Other chapters. Bikers. Bishop had never seen before wearing cuts from Reno, from Sacramento, from as far north as Portland. 50 bikes. Maybe more. They formed a circle around the cabin, engines idling, men sitting astride their machines like cavalry waiting for the charge order. And leading them, Reaper, sitting on his Harley with Clara and Eden behind him, both of them pale and shaking but alive. He must have called for backup while they were at the safe house. Must have reached out to every chapter in the western states and told them the Iron Vultures were in trouble. And they'd come, because that's what brothers did. Webb stared at the bikes, face going from confident to uncertain. What the hell is this? Reaper killed his engine and stepped forward. This, he said quietly, is a problem. Your problem. You're outnumbered. No, you are. Reaper looked at the tactical operators. 12 of you, 63 of us. And unlike your people, we don't mind dying for what we believe in. One of the operators lowered his weapon slightly. Sir, we should call for backup. Shut up, Webb snapped. But the confidence was gone from his voice now. He was doing math, calculating, realizing that even with superior weapons and training, his team couldn't hold against 60 bikers willing to charge into gunfire. Reaper stepped closer. Here's how this ends. You get in your vehicles and drive away. You report that you responded to a domestic disturbance at an abandoned cabin and found nothing. You forget the Iron Vultures exist. You forget Clara and Eden Vale exist. You forget all of this ever happened. And if I don't, then 63 witnesses watch you burn this cabin down with American citizens inside it. And we make sure that story gets told. Every news outlet, every social media platform, every politician who might find it useful. Reaper's voice went cold. You think your operation survives that kind of scrutiny? Webb's jaw tightened. The silence stretched. Then, very slowly, he raised his hand. Stand down, he told his operators. We're leaving. Sir, I said stand down. The operators lowered their weapons, confused but obedient. They retreated to the SUVs, keeping their eyes on the bikers, fingers still near triggers. Webb looked at Bishop. This isn't over. Yeah, it is. You just don't know it yet. Webb turned and walked to his SUV, got in. The engine started. The 3 vehicles rolled out of the clearing, slow and deliberate, disappearing down the mountain road the same way they'd come. The bikers didn't move until the sound of engines faded completely. Then Reaper turned to the assembled clubs. Thank you, he said simply. The Reno chapter president, a massive man called Grinder, with a white beard down to his belt, nodded. That's what the network's for. You do the same for us. Without hesitation. Then we're square. Grinder looked at the damaged cabin, at the blood on the porch, at Bishop standing alone with a gun in his hand. You need help cleaning this up? No, we've got it. Then we'll roll. Stay safe, brother. The other clubs mounted their bikes and rode out, engines echoing through the mountains until there was nothing left but silence and the smell of gun smoke hanging in the cold air. Bishop walked to where Reaper stood with Clara and Eden. The girl looked up at him with huge eyes. You came back, she whispered. Told you I would. They were going to kill us. I know. Eden threw her arms around him and Bishop held her awkwardly, the way he'd held Sarah the last time, before he shipped out, before everything went to hell. Clara was crying. Thank you, God. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Bishop said quietly. Webb's not going to let this go. He'll regroup. Come back with more people. Better prepared, Reaper nodded. Which is why we need to disappear, all of us, tonight. Where? Somewhere they won't think to look. Reaper pulled out his sat phone. I've got a contact in Montana, runs a ranch 300 miles from the nearest town. Off-grid, no paper trail. We can lay low there until this cools down. And if it doesn't cool down, then we figure out plan B, Charisieg. Inside the cabin, the vultures were tending to their wounded. Razor was still breathing, but unconscious. The kid who'd taken a shoulder round was awake and cursing. Someone had already started loading gear into vehicles, preparing to move. Bishop looked at the mountains, at the forest, at the endless western sky that seemed to stretch forever. He thought about Webb's cold smile, about the network of corruption that went all the way to the federal level, about the fact that there was nowhere left to run where men like Webb couldn't eventually find them. Reaper, Bishop said slowly. Yeah? What if we don't run? Reaper turned. What are you talking about? Webb said this operation has been running for 10 years. That's not just one person. That's infrastructure, logistics. Multiple people in multiple agencies all working together. Bishop's voice hardened. Running isn't going to stop them. They'll just find someone else to hurt, someone else to traffic, someone else's kid to disappear. So what are you proposing? We burn it down. The whole network. We find every person involved, we gather evidence, and we expose them all at once. Make it so public they can't bury it. Chains had walked over, listening. That's suicide. You know that, right? Maybe, but it's better than spending the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. Reaper was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at the other vultures, at Wraith cleaning his rifle, at Chains with blood on his jacket, at the younger members who'd signed up for a brotherhood and gotten a war instead. Vote, Reaper said. All in favor of running, raise your hand. Nobody moved. All in favor of fighting. Every hand went up. Reaper nodded slowly. Then we fight. But we do it smart. We need intel. We need to know who else is involved besides Webb. We need evidence that'll hold up in court or in the media or wherever we decide to take it. I might know someone who can help, Clara said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Before I worked at the motel, I was a paralegal. Worked for a firm in Reno that handled federal contracts. She swallowed hard. I quit because I found out one of the partners was helping corporations bury environmental violations. But while I was there, I learned how federal money moves, how to track it, how to find the paper trail. Bishop stared at her. You can trace Webb's operation? Maybe, if I can access the right databases, if I can find financial records linking him to the trafficking network. She looked scared but determined. I want to help. These people tried to kill my daughter. I want them to burn. Reaper pulled out his sat phone again. I know a hacker. Owes the club a favor. We get him Clara's information. He can probably crack whatever databases she needs. How long? Bishop asked. 2 days? Maybe 3. And in the meantime, we lay low, heal up, prepare. Reaper looked at the assembled vultures. Because when we move on this, we're going all in. No half measures. We expose these people or we die trying. Bishop looked down at Eden. She was watching him with those huge, terrified eyes, waiting to see if the adults could actually protect her this time. He thought about Sarah again, about the promise, about the fact that some fights weren't about winning, they were about refusing to surrender even when surrender was the smart play. All in, Bishop said quietly, and somewhere in the frozen Montana wilderness, as the iron vultures packed up their wounded and prepared to disappear into the mountains, Special Agent Carson Webb sat in his SUV staring at his phone, at a text message from an unknown number. It read, "We know what you are. We're coming for you, and when we're done, everyone will know." Webb deleted the message, made a phone call, and set in motion a chain of events that would either destroy the trafficking network forever or end with the iron vultures buried in unmarked graves where nobody would ever find them. The war had begun, and this time there was no walking away. The ranch in Montana was a ghost of civilization. 47 miles from the nearest paved road, buried in a valley so remote that even satellite imagery looked grainy and uncertain. The main house was timber and stone, built sometime in the 1940s by someone who valued isolation over comfort. Outbuildings dotted the property, barns, equipment sheds, a bunkhouse with a sagging roof. No power lines, no cell towers, Just a diesel generator that ran 4 hours a day and propane tanks for heat. Perfect for disappearing. The Iron Vultures had been there for 72 hours. 3 days of healing wounds, cleaning weapons, and waiting for Clara's hacker to deliver the evidence they needed to burn Carson Webb's operation to ash. Bishop stood in the barn, smoking, while sleet hammered the tin roof overhead. His ribs still ached from where he'd taken a glancing blow during the cabin firefight. His hands were scraped raw from diving through shattered glass. But he was breathing, standing, functional, more than could be said for Razor. The kid had died 12 hours after they reached the ranch, bled out internally from the chest wound despite everything Wraith tried to do. They'd buried him on a hill overlooking the valley at dawn. No words spoken, just the sound of shovels biting frozen earth while snow fell like judgment. Bishop had stood over the grave afterward thinking about Sarah, about all the graves he'd stood over in his life, about the fact that he kept surviving when people around him didn't. The barn door scraped open. Wraith stepped inside, snow dusting his shoulders, face as unreadable as ever. Clara's hacker delivered, he said quietly. Bishop's pulse quickened. When? 10 minutes ago. Encrypted file drop. Reaper's reviewing it now. They crossed the yard to the main house, boots crunching on ice. Inside, the vultures were gathered around a laptop set up on a folding table. Clara sat in front of the screen, fingers flying across the keyboard, eyes bright with the kind of focused intensity that came from someone who'd finally found a way to fight back. Reaper stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. He looked up when Bishop entered. "We've got him," Reaper said. "Webb and everyone above him." By Schwartz. Bishop moved closer. "Show me." Clara pulled up a series of documents, financial records, wire transfers, emails with redacted headers, shipping manifests that looked legitimate until you cross-referenced them against actual freight databases. "Webb isn't just running a trafficking network," Clara said. "He's laundering money through a federal anti-trafficking task force. The task force gets funding to investigate human trafficking operations. Webb uses that funding to actually run the operations. He moves people across state lines, sells them to buyers in other countries, and reports them as rescued victims who were placed in witness protection." "How much money are we talking about?" Chains asked. "How much money are we?" "Last fiscal year. $43 million in federal grants. Most of it disappeared into shell companies that don't exist." Claire's voice hardened. "And it's not just Webb. He's got partners. People in Homeland Security, ICE, even the State Department." She pulled up a list of names. Bishop scanned them, recognized none of them. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the evidence. Bank records showing transfers from federal accounts to offshore holdings. Emails discussing product and delivery schedules in language that sounded like business, but read like slavery. Shipping manifests that placed trucks in locations where people had disappeared. "This is enough," Bishop said quietly. "This is everything." "Not quite everything," Clara said. She opened another file. The hacker found something else. Webb's been communicating with someone higher up the chain. Someone who gives him orders. Someone he calls the director. "You got a name?" "No. All the communications are encrypted and routed through proxy servers. But based on the language and the timestamps, whoever this person is, they're senior level. Department head, maybe, or higher." Reaper leaned forward. "Can we trace them?" "Wutam." "Not without more time and better resources than we have." Clara looked up at him. "But we don't need to. We've got enough evidence to expose Webb and his network. Once that happens, the director will either surface or go into hiding. Either way, the operation collapses." "How do we expose it?" Bishop asked. "Multiple channels, mainstream media, independent journalists, congressional oversight committees. We send everything simultaneously so they can't kill the story before it breaks." "And then what? We just wait for the justice system to handle it?" Claire's expression darkened. "I didn't say that. I said we expose them. What happens after—" She looked at Reaper. "That's up to you." Silence fell over the room. Bishop understood what she was saying. They could release the evidence and hope the system worked. Hope that politicians cared. Hope that the media would run the story instead of burying it. Hope that justice actually happened. Or they could take matters into their own hands. Find Webb. Make sure he never hurt anyone again. Reaper pulled out a cigarette, didn't light it, just rolled it between his fingers. We do this. There's no coming back. We'll be wanted, hunted. Every federal agency in the country will be looking for us. They're already looking for us, Chain said. Not like this. Right now we're just bikers who got in over their heads. But if we release this evidence and then go after Webb ourselves? Reaper shook his head. That's domestic terrorism. That's life in prison without parole for anyone they catch. So we don't get caught, Bishop said quietly. You think it's that simple? No, but I think it's necessary. Bishop looked around the room, at the faces of men he'd ridden with for years. Men who'd saved his life. Men who'd become the only family he had left. Webb killed Razor. He tried to kill all of us. He's been trafficking people for 10 years and nobody stopped him because he had a badge and connections. That ends now. One of the younger vultures spoke up. What's the play? Bishop looked at Clara. Where is Webb right now? She typed quickly, accessing databases that probably required federal clearance. According to his office calendar, he's scheduled to be in Reno tomorrow, meeting with local law enforcement about ongoing operations. Reno, Bishop repeated. That's 300 miles from here. 4 hours on the highway, Wraith said. If we leave tonight, we can be in position by dawn. Reaper was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at the assembled vultures. This is a vote. We release the evidence and walk away, or we release it and finish this ourselves. All in favor of walking away? Nobody moved. All in favor of ending it? Every hand went up. Reaper nodded slowly. Then we ride at midnight. Clara, you send the evidence to every outlet you can think of. Timed release for 6 a.m. tomorrow. By the time Webb realizes what's happening, the story will already be live. And us? Chains asked. We make sure Webb doesn't run. We make sure he answers for what he's done. Reaper's voice went cold. One way or another. Bishop looked at Eden, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner throughout the entire conversation. She was watching him with those huge, terrified eyes. What about her, Bishop? Bishop asked. And Clara? They stay here. Whoa, Reaper said. Ranch owner's wife will watch them, keep them safe until this is over. And if it's not over? If we don't come back? Then the evidence speaks for itself, and they find a new life somewhere far from here. Bishop walked over to Eden and knelt down. I need you to be brave a little longer. You're leaving again. Yeah. To fight the bad men. Yeah. Her eyes filled with tears. What if you don't come back? Bishop didn't have an answer for that, didn't want to lie to her. So he just pulled her into a hug and held on tight, the way he should have held Sarah one more time before shipping out to Afghanistan, before everything fell apart. I'll try, he whispered. That's all I can promise. Eden buried her face in his chest and cried, and Bishop stood there in that frozen ranch house in Montana, holding a child who reminded him of everything he'd lost, and felt something inside him finally break open, not in pain, but in clarity. He'd spent 6 years running from Sarah's death, running from the guilt, running from the fact that he'd failed her. But maybe that failure had brought him here, to this moment, to this child who still had a chance. Maybe redemption wasn't about saving the past. Maybe it was about protecting the future. He pulled back and looked Eden in the eyes. I'm coming back. You hear me? I'm coming back. She nodded, not quite believing, but wanting to. Bishop stood and turned to the vultures. Midnight, he said. We ride for Reno. They left the ranch at 11:47 p.m. 16 motorcycles rolling out into the frozen Montana night, headlights cutting through darkness and falling snow, engines roaring like war drums. The temperature had dropped to 8 degrees. Ice clung to the roads. Wind screamed across the valley. But the Iron Vultures rode anyway, because that's what they did. They rode when the weather was bad, and the roads were worse, and the destination was probably death. They rode because stopping meant giving up, and men like them didn't know how to quit. Bishop led the formation, Reaper beside him, Wraith and Chains flanking. The younger members followed in tight formation, 2 by 2, disciplined and focused despite the fear that lived behind their eyes. They rode for 4 hours straight, through mountain passes and frozen plains, through small towns that were nothing but gas stations and silence, through stretches of highway so empty it felt like the world had ended, and they were the last people left alive. Bishop's hands went numb from cold despite his gloves. His face felt like raw meat from the wind, but he kept writing, kept pushing. Because Webb was in Reno and the clock was ticking, and if they didn't reach him before 6 a.m., before the evidence went live, the bastard would disappear into whatever hole people like him crawled into when the world turned against them. They reached Reno at 4:32 a.m. The city was still mostly asleep, streetlights glowing orange in the pre-dawn darkness, casinos lit up like dying stars. The vultures split into 3 groups. One headed for Webb's hotel, one for the federal building where he kept an office, one for backup. Bishop's group took the hotel, the Grand Sierra Resort. 14 floors of glass and steel on the south edge of town. Webb's room was on the 12th floor, according to the reservation Clara's hacker had pulled. Corner suite, probably paid for with laundered trafficking money. The vultures parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, 6 of them. Bishop, Reaper, Chains, Wraith, and 2 enforcers named Torch and Hammer, all armed, all prepared to do whatever was necessary. They entered through a service entrance, Wraith picking the lock in under 30 seconds. Inside, the corridors were carpeted and quiet, the kind of expensive silence that came from soundproofing and money. Emergency exit signs glowed green. Somewhere distant, elevator machinery hummed. They took the stairs. 12 flights. By the time they reached the top, Bishop's legs were burning and his breath came in white clouds despite the heated stairwell. Reaper held up a fist. Wait. Everyone stopped. Listened. From somewhere down the corridor, voices. Low. Professional. Security, maybe. Or Webb's people. Wraith crept to the door and peered through the narrow window. Came back shaking his head. 2 guards. Hallway outside Webb's suite. Armed. Can you drop them quiet? Reaper whispered. Both? At the same time? Wraith considered. Maybe. Maybe isn't good enough. Then we go loud. Bishop pulled out his Glock. How many rounds you think before hotel security responds? In a place like this? 30 seconds? Maybe less. Then we've got 30 seconds to breach the room and secure Webb. Reaper looked at the assembled vultures. Wraith, you take the guard on the left. Torch, you're on the right. Rest of us go through the door the second they drop. Fast and hard. Questions later. Everyone nodded. They stacked up at the stairwell door. Wraith and Torch moved into the hallway first, casual, like they belonged. The guards noticed them immediately, hands drifting toward weapons. Lost? One of the guards asked. Wraith smiled. Yeah, actually. Then he moved. Fast. A knife appeared in his hand and he drove it into the first guard's throat before the man could draw his weapon. Torch hit the second guard with a tire iron, the crack of metal on skull sickeningly loud in the quiet corridor. Both guards dropped. Bishop was already running. He hit Webb's door with his shoulder and it didn't budge. Reinforced, probably steel core. Chains stepped up with a breaching tool and smashed the lock. The door flew inward. Inside, the suite was dark, except for the glow of a laptop on the desk. Webb sat in front of it, not surprised, not scared, just waiting. Took you longer than I expected, Webb said calmly. Bishop raised his weapon. Stand up, hands where I can see them. Webb stood slowly. You think this changes anything? You think killing me stops what's coming? We're not here to kill you. We're here to make sure you face justice. Webb laughed. Justice. That's what you call breaking into a hotel room with guns? That's what you call murdering 2 federal officers in the hallway? They were traffickers, just like you. Prove it. We will. Evidence goes live in... Bishop checked his watch. 93 minutes. Bank records, emails, shipping manifests, everything. For the first time, Webb's expression flickered. You don't have that. We do. And by sunrise, every news outlet in the country will too. Webb's jaw tightened. You stupid bastard. You have no idea what you've just done. Enlightened us. The network you're trying to expose? It's not just trafficking, it's counterintelligence. It's national security operations hidden inside humanitarian programs. You release that evidence, you don't just burn me, you compromise active operations in 6 countries. You get people killed, undercover agents, informants, entire networks. Bishop felt cold slide down his spine. Reaper stepped forward. You're lying. Am I? You think an operation this big runs on trafficking money alone? We move assets, human assets, people who provide intelligence in exchange for new identities, people who would be executed if their governments found them. Webb's voice hardened. You expose this, you're not heroes, you're traitors. Chain swore under his breath. Bishop's mind raced. If Webb was telling the truth, if the trafficking network was cover for intelligence operations, then releasing the evidence could actually get people killed. Real people. Innocent people. But if Webb was lying, if this was just another play to buy time, I don't believe you, Bishop said. Call your hacker friend. Ask her to look deeper into the financial records. You'll find payments to foreign nationals, payments that correspond with asylum applications, payments that line up with intelligence reports. Webb sat back down. You want to burn this down? Go ahead, but the blood will be on your hands, not mine. Silence. Then Reaper's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, checked the message. His face went pale. What? Bishop asked. Clara, she found something. Reaper's voice was tight. Webb's right. Some of the people they moved through the network, they weren't trafficking victims. They were refugees, asylum seekers, people running from cartels, from war zones, from governments that wanted them dead. And the others? Bishop demanded. The ones locked in containers? The ones Mercer was selling? Those were real victims, Reaper admitted. But Webb's people were running both operations simultaneously, using the trafficking infrastructure to hide the intelligence extractions. Bishop felt like the ground had dropped out from under him. They'd been so sure, so certain that Webb was pure evil. But the truth was messier, darker, more complicated than good guys and bad guys. So what do we do? Chains asked quietly. Bishop looked at Webb. The federal agent smiled. You walk away. You delete the evidence. You forget this ever happened. And maybe, I convince the director not to hunt you down like the domestic terrorists you are. And the real trafficking victims? The ones who are actually being sold? Collateral damage. Sometimes you have to break eggs to make an omelet. Bishop's finger tightened on the trigger. Every instinct screamed at him to pull it, to end Webb right here. But Reaper's hand landed on his shoulder. Don't, not like this. He's admitting to trafficking. And we don't have clean hands anymore either. We killed his guards. We broke into a federal agent's hotel room. We're about to release classified intelligence that could compromise national security. Reaper's voice was heavy. We crossed the line, brother. We became the thing we were fighting. Bishop wanted to argue, wanted to believe there was still a clear right and wrong. But looking at Webb's smug face, at the laptop glowing with evidence that was both damning and justified, at the blood on his own hands from the guards in the hallway, he didn't know anymore. The hotel alarm started screaming. Security had found the bodies. We need to move, Wraith said urgently. Now. Reaper grabbed Bishop's arm. We're leaving. Take Webb with us. What? You heard me. We take him. Keep him alive until we figure out what's true and what's bullshit. Then we decide what to do with him. Webb stood. You abduct a federal agent, that's kidnapping. That's life in prison. Good thing we're already facing that, Chain said. He grabbed Webb and zip-tied his hands behind his back. Move. They hauled Webb out of the suite, through the corridor, past the dead guards, and into the stairwell. Sirens were already wailing outside. Police responding. Hotel security mobilizing. The vultures ran. Down 12 flights of stairs with Webb stumbling between them. Out through the service entrance. Across 2 blocks of frozen pavement to where their bikes waited. They shoved Webb onto the back of Torch's bike and roared away from the hotel just as police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing blue and red in the pre-dawn darkness. They rode hard. South out of Reno. Away from the city. Toward the empty stretches of highway where they could disappear. Bishop's phone buzzed. He checked it without slowing down. A message from Clara. Evidence is live. Every major outlet has it. It's spreading, but something's wrong. The director just sent a message through one of Webb's encrypted channels. Says the network was approved at the highest levels. Says if we don't back down, they're coming for everyone we care about. Bishop's blood went cold. Bishop's blood. He looked back at where Webb sat on Torch's bike, hands bound, face grim. And he realized they'd just made a terrible mistake. The evidence was live. The world knew about the trafficking network, but the director, whoever they were, wasn't going to let this exposure stand. and they were about to bring the full weight of the federal government down on the iron vultures like a hammer. Bishop twisted the throttle harder. The highway disappeared beneath him in a blur of white lines and frozen asphalt. Behind him, the sun was starting to rise over the Nevada desert, painting the sky blood red. And somewhere in the distance, engines were roaring. Not motorcycles. Helicopters. Whoa. They abandoned the highway 20 miles south of Reno and headed into the backcountry. Dirt roads that barely qualified as trails. Rocky terrain that threatened to throw bikes sideways. Wind-carved canyons where the sound of engines echoed like thunder. The helicopters followed. Blackhawks. Military grade. Flying low and fast, searchlights cutting through the morning haze. "They're hurting us!" Reaper shouted over the engine noise. "Pushing us east!" "Toward what?" Bishop yelled back. "Don't know, but it's not good." The formation broke apart as the terrain got rougher. Bikes scattered through the canyon, some going north, some south, trying to split the pursuit and buy time. Bishop stayed with Reaper in chains, Webb still zip-tied on Torch's bike behind them. The helicopters stayed locked on their group. "They want Webb," Bishop realized. "They're tracking him." "How?" Bishop didn't know. GPS tracker, maybe. Something sewn into his clothes or implanted under his skin. It didn't matter. What mattered was that as long as Webb was with them, the helicopters wouldn't break off. The canyon narrowed ahead, walls closing in on both sides. Wraith's voice crackled over the radio headset. "It's a kill box. They're funneling us into a dead end." "Options?" Reaper demanded. "We ditch the bikes and go on foot, lose them in the rocks. Well, and leave our cuts behind? Our bikes? Or we stand and fight and die in the next 5 minutes. Your call, Prez." Reaper was silent for 3 seconds that felt like hours. Then, "Ditch the bikes. Everyone scatter. Rally Point Delta in 72 hours. Anyone who doesn't make it..." His voice cracked slightly. "You're remembered. Your family." Bishop felt his throat tighten. This was it. The end of the iron vultures as he knew them. He pulled his bike to a skidding stop and dismounted. The others did the same. 16 motorcycles abandoned in a canyon, engines still ticking hot, leather cuts left draped over seats like battle flags. Webb was on his feet now, zip ties cut, surrounded by 6 bikers with weapons drawn. "You're making a mistake," Webb said. "The director will never stop. They'll hunt you forever." "Then we make sure they don't find anything worth hunting," Reaper said. He looked at Bishop. "Get Webb into the rocks. Keep him alive. He's our only leverage." "Where are you going?" "To buy you time." Reaper pulled out his handgun and checked the magazine. "Chains? Wraith, you're with me. Everyone else, scatter. Survive. We'll rebuild when this is over." "Reaper, that's an order," Road Captain. Bishop wanted to argue. Wanted to tell Reaper he was being an idiot, but he saw the look in the old man's eyes. The look of someone who'd already made peace with what was coming. And he understood. Reaper was going to fight, going to draw the helicopters away from the others, going to die so his brothers could live. "It's been an honor," Bishop said quietly. Reaper gripped his hand. "Take care of that girl, the one who reminds you of Sarah. Give her the life your daughter never got." Then he turned and walked back toward the bikes with Chains and Wraith beside him. Bishop grabbed Webb and ran, into the rocks, into the maze of canyons and stone that stretched for miles in every direction. Behind him, engines roared as Reaper and the others mounted their bikes and rode straight toward the approaching helicopters, weapons raised, screaming defiance into the dawn. Gunfire erupted, heavy caliber, the stuttering thunder of mounted machine guns. Bishop didn't look back, just ran. Deeper into the wilderness, Webb stumbling beside him, the sound of his brothers dying echoing through the canyons like a funeral dirge. And when the gunfire finally stopped, and the helicopters circled overhead searching for survivors, Bishop Crow pressed himself into a crevice between 2 massive boulders and felt something inside him finally shatter beyond repair. The iron vultures were gone. Reaper was gone. Everything he'd fought for, everyone he'd called family, scattered or dead or running for their lives across the frozen American wasteland. He looked at Webb. The federal agent was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, breathing hard, eyes wide with fear. "They're going to kill everyone you ever cared about," Webb whispered. "The director doesn't leave loose ends." Bishop's hand found his gun. "Then I guess I don't either." He pressed the barrel against Webb's temple, and in the distance, Another helicopter appeared on the horizon, larger than the others, flanked by two more Blackhawks heading straight for their position. This was it, the final stand. Bishop Crow, the last iron vulture, trapped in a canyon with a hostage and a gun and absolutely nothing left to lose. He looked up at the approaching helicopters, thought about Sarah one last time, about Eden waiting back at the ranch, about the promise he'd made. Then he pulled Webb to his feet and started climbing, higher into the rocks, toward the ridge, toward whatever came next. Because even broken men could still fight. Even ghosts could still protect something good. And as long as Bishop Crow was breathing, Carson Webb's director was going to learn what happened when you threatened the only family an outlaw had left. The helicopters closed in. Searchlights flooded the canyon. Amplified voices demanded surrender. Bishop kept climbing. And somewhere in the frozen Nevada morning, the real war was just beginning. The ridge was a knife edge of rock jutting out over a canyon that dropped 300 feet straight down. Bishop stood at the edge with Webb bleeding beside him. Helicopters circling overhead like mechanical vultures. Searchlights sweeping across stone and scrub brush. The wind was brutal up here, screaming across the ridge with enough force to make standing difficult. His hands were numb. His face felt like frozen leather. But he didn't move. Couldn't move because moving meant choosing, and every choice led to the same place. Death. The lead helicopter descended slowly, rotors kicking up dust and loose gravel. An amplified voice cut through the wind. Bishop Crow, you're surrounded. Release Special Agent Webb and surrender. This is your final warning. Bishop pressed his gun harder against Webb's skull. Tell them to back off, or I throw you off this ridge. Webb's laugh was bitter. You won't. You're not that kind of man. You don't know what kind of man I am. Yeah, I do. You're the kind who holds dying kids in the rain and promises to protect them. The kind who can't pull the trigger when it counts because deep down you still believe the world can be saved. Webb's voice dropped to a whisper. That's why you'll lose. Because men like me stopped believing a long time ago. Bishop's finger tightened on the trigger. 1 pound of pressure, that's all it would take. One squeeze and Carson Webb's brains would paint the rocks, and maybe, just maybe, the helicopters would back off long enough for Bishop to disappear into the wilderness. But Webb was right. Bishop wasn't that man. Couldn't be. Because if he became the kind of person who executed prisoners in cold blood, then everything he'd fought for, Sarah's memory, Eden's future, the idea that broken men could still protect something good, all of it would be meaningless. He lowered the gun. Webb exhaled slowly. Smart choice. Shut up. Bishop pulled out his phone. No signal, but he'd recorded everything Webb said back at the hotel. The admission about trafficking, about using humanitarian programs as cover, about the director. Even if he didn't make it off this ridge alive, the recording was backed up to an encrypted server. Clara had access. She could release it alongside the financial evidence. The truth would get out, one way or another. He looked at the lead helicopter, at the shadowy figures visible through the windows, at the door gunner with a .50 caliber machine gun pointed directly at his chest. Then he raised his hands. I'm coming down, he shouted. Don't shoot! The amplified voice responded. Release Agent Webb. Walk toward the helicopter slowly, hands visible at all times. Bishop pushed Webb forward. The federal agent stumbled, caught himself, then turned back with an expression that was almost pitying. You should have run when you had the chance, Webb said. Probably. They're going to bury you so deep nobody will ever find you. Maybe. But the evidence is already out there. Your operation is burned. The director is exposed. Even if I die today, you lose. Webb's smile faded. You really think releasing documents changes anything? Tomorrow there will be a press conference. Some senior official will claim it was all a rogue operation. They'll throw me under the bus, reorganize the task force under a new name, and keep doing exactly what they've been doing. Nothing changes. The machine keeps grinding. Bishop started walking toward the helicopter. Then I guess dying means something after all. Because at least people will know. At least there's a record. At least when the next person stands where I'm standing, they'll know they're not alone. He was halfway to the helicopter when he heard it. Engines, not helicopters, motorcycles, coming from the south, from the direction of the abandoned bikes, roaring up the canyon access road with the unmistakable thunder of Harley-Davidson V-twins pushed to their absolute limit. Bishop stopped. The helicopters immediately swung their searchlights toward the sound. And then they appeared. Not 16 bikes, 40, maybe more, pouring out of the canyon and spreading across the valley floor like a tide of chrome and leather. Iron Vultures, Reno chapter, Sacramento chapter, clubs Bishop had never even heard of, all riding in formation with engines screaming defiance into the dawn. Leading them was Reaper, alive, bleeding from a shoulder wound, face pale but determined, riding his Harley one-handed with the other arm hanging limp. Beside him, Chains and Wraith, also alive, also bloodied but breathing. The helicopters broke formation, circling to assess this new threat. The amplified voice crackled with uncertainty. All ground units, stand down. Repeat, stand down. Do not engage the civilian motorcycles. But the bikes didn't stop. They roared closer, forming a protective circle around the base of the ridge, engines idling in sync like a mechanical heartbeat. 60 bikers, 70. More arriving every second, summoned by whatever call Reaper had sent out before the firefight. The lead helicopter descended until it hovered 20 feet above the ridge, rotors deafening. A door opened. A figure stepped into view. Not military, not tactical. A woman in her mid-50s, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing an expensive suit that looked ridiculous at 7,000 feet in the middle of nowhere. She held a microphone connected to the helicopter's PA system. When she spoke, her voice was ice. My name is Deputy Director Sarah Vance, Department of Homeland Security. I am ordering all civilian personnel to disperse immediately. This is a federal operation. Interference will result in arrest and prosecution. Reaper's voice boomed back, amplified by a megaphone someone had produced. This is American soil. These are American citizens. You want to arrest us? You better bring a lot more helicopters. Vance's expression didn't change. Mr. Crow, Agent Webb, step away from the civilians and board the helicopter. Now. Bishop looked down at the sea of motorcycles below. Bishop looked down at Reaper standing beside his bike, wounded but unbroken, at Chains and Wraith, and dozens of other faces he recognized and dozens more he didn't. They'd come for him, knowing they'd probably die, knowing the federal government would hunt them forever. But they'd come anyway, because that's what family did. Bishop turned to face Vance. I'm not going anywhere until you answer one question. You're in no position to negotiate. Are you the director? Silence. Vance's face remained perfectly composed, but something flickered behind her eyes, just for a second, and Bishop knew. You are, he said quietly. You're the one Webb reports to. You're running the whole operation. I run a task force dedicated to combating human trafficking across 6 western states. Agent Webb was operating under my authorization within the scope of that mission. Bullshit! You were trafficking people yourself, using federal money to buy and sell human beings. We were extracting intelligence assets from hostile territories and providing them safe passage to the United States in exchange for information vital to national security. Sometimes those assets were embedded within criminal organizations. Sometimes the extraction process required us to move them through existing trafficking networks. Vance's voice hardened. What you call trafficking, I call saving lives. And the real victims? The ones who weren't intelligence assets? The ones locked in containers? Regrettable but necessary. We couldn't expose the intelligence operation by selectively extracting only our assets. We had to move everyone. Some of those individuals were unfortunately sold to maintain our cover. But Bishop felt sick. She was admitting it. Admitting that innocent people had been trafficked, sold into slavery to protect a federal intelligence operation. And she felt no guilt, no remorse, just cold calculation. How many? Bishop asked. How many people did you sacrifice? I don't have exact numbers. Guess. Vance's jaw tightened. Over 10 years, perhaps 200 individuals who were not intelligence assets were moved through the network and subsequently sold. 200 people. 200 lives destroyed to protect an operation. 2. Bishop looked at Webb, who stood silent now, face pale. Did you know? Bishop asked him. Webb didn't answer. Did you know you were selling innocent people? I knew what I needed to know to do my job. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get. Webb turned to face Vance. Ma'am, we need to contain this situation. The evidence is already live. Every news outlet has it. If we don't control the narrative, I'm aware of the situation, Agent Webb. But Vance's voice was arctic. And I'm handling it. She looked down at the assembled bikers, at Reaper. At the cameras, several of them were holding up, recording everything. Bishop realized what was happening. This confrontation was being live-streamed. The bikers weren't just here to rescue him. They were here to be witnesses, to make sure whatever happened next couldn't be buried or spun or disappeared. Vance realized it too. Her expression shifted, just slightly, from confidence to calculation. Mr. Crow, she said carefully, I understand you believe you were acting righteously, and perhaps from a certain perspective you were, but you've compromised active intelligence operations. You've released classified information. You've killed federal officers. Officers who were traffickers. Officers who were doing their duty. And now you're going to face consequences for your actions. She paused. However, I'm prepared to offer you a deal. You surrender. You plead guilty to manslaughter and obstruction charges. You serve 10 years in a minimum security facility. And in exchange, I ensure that Clara Vale and her daughter receive genuine protection. They disappear into witness security. New identities, new lives. No one ever finds them. And my brothers? The bikers below are guilty of assembly and trespassing, misdemeanors. They pay fines and go home. It was a trap. Bishop knew it was a trap, but looking down at Reaper's bleeding shoulder, at the dozens of men who'd ridden into a federal operation to save him, at the cameras recording every word, he also knew it was the best deal he was going to get. I want it in writing, Bishop said, signed by you, witnessed by media, and I want Clara and Eden relocated before I set foot in a prison cell. Vance nodded slowly. Acceptable. Bishop looked at Webb. And him? He just walks away? Agent Webb will be reassigned. His testimony will be crucial in the reorganization of the task force. So he gets promoted while 200 people stay missing. The world isn't fair, Mr. Crow. Surely you've learned that by now. Bishop had learned it. Had learned it when Sarah died while he was overseas smoking a cigarette. Had learned it when the VA told him his PTSD wasn't service-connected. Had learned it every day of his life since coming home to a country that didn't want its broken soldiers. But learning it and accepting it were different things. He pulled out his phone. I'm sending you a file. Recorded conversation with Webb. Him admitting to trafficking. Him admitting the director approved it. Vance's expression didn't change. That recording is inadmissible. Obtained under duress. Don't care about courts. Care about truth. Bishop hit send. That recording is now backed up in 17 different locations. Encrypted servers, journalist contacts, congressional offices. You bury me, it gets released. You come after my brothers, it gets released. You touch Clara or Eden, it gets released. That sounds like blackmail. That sounds like insurance. They stared at each other. Two people on opposite sides of a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Finally, Vance spoke. You'll never be free. You understand that. Even if you serve your time and get released, you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering when we're coming. I've been doing that since Afghanistan. I'm used to it. Then we have an agreement. Bishop turned to the assembled bikers below, raised his voice so the cameras could hear. Reaper, take everyone home. This is done. Reaper's voice came back rough with emotion. Brother, it's done. I made a choice. Now I'm living with it. Bishop looked down at the old man who'd given him a family when he had nothing. Take care of Eden. Make sure she knows... His voice cracked. Make sure she knows I kept my promise. Reaper nodded once. Then he mounted his bike. The other vultures did the same. Engines roared to life. 60 motorcycles turning in formation, preparing to leave. But before they rode away, Reaper raised his fist, and every single biker did the same. A salute. A farewell. A promise that Bishop Crow, broken, damaged, haunted Bishop Crow, would be remembered. Then they rode, engines fading into the distance until there was nothing left but wind and helicopters and the cold Nevada morning. Bishop turned to Vance. Let's get this over with. They processed him at a federal facility outside Las Vegas. Fingerprints, photographs, medical examination, interrogation that lasted 6 hours and yielded nothing because Bishop had already said everything that mattered on that ridge. He pled guilty to manslaughter in the deaths of Mercer's guards, guilty to obstruction of a federal investigation, guilty to assault on a federal agent. The judge gave him 12 years, eligible for parole in 8. Bishop didn't fight it, just stood there in his orange jumpsuit while they read the sentence and took him away in chains. The last thing he saw before they locked him in the transport van was Clara and Eden sitting in the courtroom gallery. Eden was crying, Clara was holding her, and Bishop thought about Sarah one more time, about how he'd failed to protect her, about how he'd spent 6 years drowning in guilt, and realized that maybe redemption wasn't about erasing the past. Maybe it was about making sure the past didn't repeat itself. Eden was alive. Clara was alive. The network was exposed, even if Vance would probably survive and rebuild. And somewhere out there, the Iron Vultures were still riding, still protecting people who couldn't protect themselves, still carrying the torch. That was enough. It had to be. 8 years later, Bishop walked out of Terminal Island Federal Prison on a Tuesday morning in March. The California sun was bright enough to hurt after years of fluorescent lights. The air smelled like ocean and gasoline. Traffic hummed on the nearby freeway. Normal sounds. Normal world. A world that had kept spinning while he'd been locked away. He stood on the sidewalk with a duffel bag containing everything he owned. A few books, letters from the club, photographs, and wondered what the hell he was supposed to do next. Then he heard it. An engine, not a car, a motorcycle. A Harley-Davidson Road King rolled up to the curb and stopped. Reaper sat astride it. 8 years older, beard white as snow, face more weathered, but alive. Still breathing. Still wearing his Iron Vulture's cut. "You're late," Reaper said. Bishop almost smiled. "You're supposed to be in Montana." "Montana's boring. Figured I'd come get you instead." "How'd you know when I was getting released?" "Parole board sends notifications. We've been keeping track." Reaper pulled a leather cut out of his saddlebag and tossed it to Bishop. "Put it on." Bishop caught it, his old cut, the one he'd been wearing when they arrested him. Someone had cleaned it, repaired the tears, kept it safe all these years. He slipped it on, felt the weight settle across his shoulders, felt like coming home. "Club's different now," Reaper said. "Smaller. We lost some people over the years, but we're still here, still riding." "What about Clara and Eden?" "Safe. New identities. New life in Oregon. Eden's in college now, pre-med, wants to be a doctor." Bishop felt something warm bloom in his chest. "She survived. Thanks to you. I didn't do anything, just bought her time." Time was all she needed. Reaper kicked the bike into neutral. "You hungry?" "Starving. Know a diner about 60 miles north. Makes the worst coffee you've ever tasted. You'll love it." They rode. North along the coast highway with the ocean spreading infinite and blue to the west and the mountains rising dark to the east. Wind in Bishop's face. Sun on his shoulders. The bike's engine thrumming between his legs like a second heartbeat. He'd forgotten what freedom felt like. Forgotten the simple joy of choosing which direction to ride. They pulled into the diner just before noon. It was exactly like Reaper described. Sagging roof, peeling paint, neon sign that read Rose's Diner in flickering pink letters. Inside the booths were cracked vinyl and the coffee smelled burned. Perfect. Bishop slid into a booth. Reaper sat across from him. An old waitress came over with a pot of coffee and 2 mugs. She filled them without asking, then disappeared. Bishop wrapped his hands around the mug and let the heat seep into his fingers. "So what now?" he asked. "Now you rebuild. Find a job. Find a place to live. Adjust to being free again." Reaper pulled out a cigarette, didn't light it. "Club's got work if you want it. Mechanic shop in Sacramento needs someone who knows their way around motorcycles." "Legal work?" "Mostly." Bishop almost smiled. They sat in silence for a while, drinking terrible coffee and watching highway traffic roll past outside. Then Reaper spoke quietly. "You know she asks about you." Bishop looked up. "Who?" "Eden. Clara sends updates through secure channels sometimes. Kid wants to know if you're okay, if you're getting out, if she'll ever see you again." Bishop's throat tightened. "What do you tell her?" that you're alive, that you made a choice to protect her, that she should focus on her future instead of the past. Reaper paused. But between you and me, I think she'd like to hear from you. When you're ready, I don't even know what I'd say. You'll figure it out. You always do. Bishop looked down at his coffee, at his reflection in the dark liquid. He looked older, harder, lines carved around his eyes that hadn't been there 8 years ago. But he was still breathing, still here, still capable of protecting something good. Reaper, Bishop said slowly, when I was inside, I had a lot of time to think about Sarah, about what happened, about why I couldn't let go. And I realized I wasn't mourning her. I was mourning myself. The version of me that existed before she died. The version that still believed the world was fair. Bishop looked up. But that version was a lie. The world was never fair. I just hadn't learned it yet. So what changed? Eden, Clara, the people we saved. They proved that even in an unfair world, people can still choose to do the right thing, can still choose to protect instead of destroy, can still be broken and damaged and haunted and still matter. Reaper nodded slowly. Sounds like you found peace. I wouldn't call it peace, more like acceptance. Close enough. Outside, more motorcycles pulled into the parking lot, iron vultures. Some faces Bishop recognized, some he didn't. They filed into the diner one by one. Chains with more gray in his beard, Wraith still moving like a ghost, younger members wearing fresh cuts. They nodded to Bishop as they passed, acknowledged him, welcomed him back. And for the first time in 8 years, Bishop felt something he'd thought was gone forever. Belonging. They ate lunch together. Terrible burgers and worse fries and coffee that tasted like motor oil. They talked about bikes and roads and places they'd been. They didn't talk about prison or the trial or the years Bishop had lost, just brothers sharing a meal. Afterward, they stood in the parking lot while the afternoon sun painted everything gold. Reaper handed Bishop a helmet. You riding with us? Bishop looked at his bike, the Road King he'd left behind 8 years ago, maintained and preserved by the club, waiting for him. He threw a leg over, fired the engine, felt it roar to life beneath him. Where are we headed? He asked. North, maybe Oregon, maybe Washington. Maybe we just ride until we run out of road. Sounds good. They rolled out of the parking lot in formation. 16 bikes, engines synchronized, chrome flashing in the sunlight. Bishop rode in the middle of the pack, surrounded by his brothers, the highway disappearing beneath him in a blur of white lines and possibility. He didn't know where this road led, didn't know what the future held, but he knew he wasn't alone anymore. And sometimes, on the long, empty highways that stretched across the American wasteland, that was enough. 6 months later, on a cold evening in October, Bishop stood outside a small house in a quiet Oregon suburb. Lights glowed warm through the windows. A car sat in the driveway. Ordinary, normal, the kind of life he'd never thought possible. He'd spent weeks tracking down Clara's new address through old contacts and encrypted messages. Weeks debating whether he should reach out, whether Eden would even remember him. But finally, he'd made the choice. Walked up to the door, knocked, footsteps inside. The door opened. Clara stood there, older but recognizable, eyes widening when she saw him. Bishop, she whispered. Hey. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Clara pulled him into a hug, tight and desperate, the kind of hug reserved for people who'd survived impossible things together. She's here, Clara said when they finally pulled apart. She's been waiting. She led him inside. The house was small but warm. Photographs on the walls, books on shelves, evidence of a life rebuilt from ashes. Eden sat at the kitchen table doing homework, 20 years old now, no longer the terrified 12-year-old with bruises on her wrists. She'd grown tall, strong. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a college sweatshirt. She looked up when Bishop entered, and for 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. Then Eden stood, crossed the kitchen, and threw her arms around him. Bishop held her awkwardly, the same way he'd held her that night in the Montana ranch, not sure what to do, not sure what to say. But Eden knew. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for keeping your promise. Bishop's eyes burned. He didn't trust himself to speak, so he just held on and thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made over her grave, about the fact that he'd finally, after 8 years of prison and 6 years of grief and a lifetime of failure, actually kept it. He'd protected someone, saved someone, mattered. They stayed like that for a long time. Then Eden pulled back and looked at him with eyes that no longer held terror. Just gratitude, just warmth. "Mom says you're out for good now," she said. "Yeah, parole conditions. But yeah, I'm out." "What are you going to do?" "Don't know yet. Work, ride. Try to figure out what normal looks like." "Will you stay in touch? Let us know you're okay." Bishop nodded. "If you want me to." "I do. We both do." Eden glanced at her mother, who was crying quietly in the doorway. "You're family, Bishop. You'll always be family." The word hit him like a punch. Family. Not blood, not DNA, but chosen, earned, built from sacrifice and promises kept, and the simple act of showing up when everyone else walked away. "Yeah," Bishop said quietly. "Family." They talked for hours that night, about college, about Eden's dreams of becoming a doctor, about Clara's new job as a paralegal for a nonprofit that helped trafficking survivors, about the way the past never fully disappeared but could be survived, about the fact that broken people could still build good lives if they tried hard enough. When it was time to leave, Bishop stood on the porch while Eden and Clara watched from the doorway. "You'll come back?" Eden asked. "When I can." "Promise?" Bishop looked at her, at this young woman who'd survived hell and come out stronger, at the proof that sometimes, just sometimes, damaged men could protect something good. "Promise," he said. He walked to his bike, mounted up, fired the engine, and rode away into the Oregon night, the house lights fading behind him, the road stretching endlessly ahead. Somewhere out there, Reaper and the Iron Vultures were waiting. Somewhere out there, the American highway stretched on forever, broken and beautiful and unforgiving. Somewhere out there, broken men on steel horses kept riding through neon nights and bad weather, carrying their scars like armor, searching for redemption one lonely mile at a time. And Bishop Crow, haunted, damaged, still breathing Bishop Crow, was finally okay with that. Not happy, not healed, but okay. And on the long, dark roads that stretched across the wasteland, okay was enough to keep riding. The engine roared beneath him, the stars wheeled overhead, and somewhere in the frozen American night, the ghosts of the past finally stopped screaming. Not forgiveness, not redemption, just silence. And the road. Always the road. The Iron Vultures still ride. Through truck stops and dying towns, through storms and silence, through the forgotten corners of America where broken people go to disappear. They're not heroes, never were. Just damaged men who decided that if the world was cruel, they'd be the ones standing between that cruelty and the people who couldn't fight back. Bishop Crow served his time, kept his promise, and learned that some wounds never heal, but they can be survived. Eden became a doctor. Clara rebuilt her life. The trafficking network got reorganized under a new name and kept grinding because machines don't stop just because you expose them. But 200 names got added to a database. 200 stories got told. And somewhere, someone who would have been disappeared got saved instead. That's not victory. But it's something. And for men like Bishop Crow, men who've already lost everything, something is enough to keep breathing. The highway goes on forever. The neon still bleeds into wet asphalt. And the Iron Vultures keep riding, until there's nothing left but chrome and memory and the promise that nobody rides alone. Thank you for riding with us. What city are you in? Drop a comment. This story was for you.